Warcraft, the Tree of Eternity. This video is purely for entertainment and does not infringe on copyrights or laws. The rights to the novel and image belong to the original author. We do not claim ownership. Don't like waiting and want to listen to this fanfic in full now? Subscribe to our Patreon, where you'll find the best fanfics. Chapter 226. The title is obtained. Although only half an hour had passed, Grand Duke Child was already waiting outside anxiously. Although he was sure that Euphony would not do anything unfavorable to his son, he was more looking forward to Euphony being able to wake up Rothschild. Although the Saint Child family did not find out about Jumu Town in a short period of time, and did not know Euphony's so-called mysterious teacher's excuse, Euphony was a cloud-level wizard at a young age. If he said that there was no master behind him, no one would believe it. In addition, Euphony's performance was clearly very confident, so Grand Duke Child had great hope. In this half an hour, several other people from the Child family also came outside the room. Even Grand Duke Child looked respectful. They were the fathers of Grand Duke Child, and also some of the legendary powerhouses of the Child family. Hearing that a young man who claimed to be able to repair his grandson's mental trauma had come to the family, Grand Duke Child's father, the white-bearded magician, came here first. Then Rothschild's second grandfather, the legendary wind and spiritual mage whose spiritual body was destroyed by Euphony's body, heard about this and rushed here. Next, the old men who appeared when Rothschild came back with the teleportation scroll came to the outside of the room, waiting for Euphony to come out. Because he was concentrating on sorting out Rothschild's spiritual world, Euphony did not notice the arrival of several people at the beginning. However, after treating Rothschild, Euphony habitually used his spiritual power to scan the surroundings, and suddenly found that there were many more people outside the room, which scared him. However, although there were several more powerful people, the Child family still did not pose any threat to Euphony, so Euphony calmly lingered in the room for nearly half an hour before coming out. Squeak. Hearing the sound of the door, the people waiting outside the room all brightened their eyes and looked at the door that was pushed open. However, when they saw Euphony's figure appear, except for Grand Duke Child, the eyes of several old people showed a trace of disappointment. It was not because of anything else, but because Euphony covered himself in a magic robe, and no one could see what he looked like. Of course, when the old men heard about Euphony's arrival, they also knew that Euphony was very young, so they became curious about Euphony. Now they were naturally disappointed that they could not see what Euphony looked like. Euphony had no other choice. Although it would make people feel very strange and even suspicious to cover himself with a magic robe all the time, Euphony had no other choice. If he did not hide his face under the magic robe, it would not be as simple as suspicion. Even the identity of a cloud-level wizard could not provide protection for an elf in the human world. Although Euphony also learned some disguise methods in the royal database of the Kingdom of Severn, those methods were either too superficial or required the use of magic methods, which were easily discovered by wizards. Therefore, Euphony still chose to hide his face under the magic robe. Seeing Grand Duke Child walking up quickly and opening his mouth to ask questions, Euphony pretended to sound very tired, and after saying "I have fulfilled my mission," he went to the room arranged by Grand Duke Child to rest on the pretext of being too tired. After Grand Duke Child, several old men who were about to come forward to chat with Euphony could only stay where they were awkwardly. However, under the guidance of Grand Duke Child, they all walked into the room where Rothschild was. On a gorgeous bed against the wall of the room, a pale young man was lying on the bed with his eyes closed. Although Euphony had sorted out Rothschild's chaotic spiritual world, he would naturally not wake up so soon, and was still in a coma. No, it should be considered a sleeping state now. Seeing that Rothschild still had his eyes closed, Grand Duke Child frowned, and then quickly stretched out. He naturally did not think that Euphony would deceive him. Since Euphony said that he had fulfilled his mission, his son should be fine now. However, he was still a little worried, so he asked his second uncle, the legendary master of wind and spirit, to investigate. And Rothschild's second grandfather had already been eager to try without Grand Duke Child saying anything. As soon as he entered the room, he extended his mental power to Rothschild and began to observe Rothschild's mental state. After a while, Rothschild's second grandfather attracted his outward mental power closed his eyes, and let out a long breath. Grand Duke Child hurriedly asked, "Second uncle, how is Ross now?" The second grandfather opened his eyes, with an unconcealable shock in his eyes. The other old men couldn't help their curiosity at this time, and asked about Rothschild's condition. Under the urging of the white-bearded magician, the eldest brother among the old men, Rothschild's second grandfather finally adjusted his thinking, and told everyone what he had found out. Ross's spiritual world was completely collapsed, and all his spiritual power was scattered in a mess. Only with extremely powerful spiritual power can Ross's scattered spiritual power be sorted out, and then a spiritual world can be constructed. Pursing his lips, the second grandfather continued, "Even for me, it is unimaginable to complete such a huge task. I think even an epic spiritual mage can only sort out Ross's scattered spiritual power, but cannot construct a spiritual world. That is to say, Ross can wake up, but he does not have the strength of a cloud level mage." Then the second grandfather's tone turned into amazement. But the incredible thing is that the young man just now actually restored Ross's spiritual world completely. Ross is now in a sleeping state, and when he wakes up, he will still be the genius mage of the St. Child family. While the second grandfather was speaking, Grand Duke Child was in a state of holding his breath and listening attentively. When he heard that his son had fully recovered, Grand Duke Child felt a black screen in front of his eyes, and almost fainted with joy. This is great. Although he had seen countless storms, when it came to himself, Grand Duke Child still couldn't hide his excitement. Although he was shocked that Yufei had done something that an epic level mage couldn't do. After all, his son's mental trauma had been resolved. Grand Duke Child didn't think much about it, but quickly asked the people around him to call some maids to serve Rothschild. But he didn't think much, and the old men next to him thought a lot. Yufei's identity as a cloud level mage was certain. First, they believed in the intelligence capabilities of the St. Child family, and second, they had just met Yufei, and judged that Yufei was a cloud level mage through his breath. In this case, there were many things that could be thought of. What kind of secret method could allow a cloud level mage to do something that an epic level mage couldn't do? In other words, what kind of person or force would have this secret method? As part of the high-end strength of the Holy Lion Empire, several people had to think more. If there is a force behind this young mage, it is actually nothing, because there are so many forces on the continent, there is nothing to worry about. And it is not difficult to accept that some big forces have magical secrets. But if there is a person behind this young mage, it is a bit scary. Those who can possess such magical secrets must be either mythical masters or epic spiritual masters. Both of these identities are very important on the Slays continent. It is impossible for the people of the St. Child family not to be tempted by this secret method that can repair mental trauma, but they wisely did not do anything. Not to mention whether it will offend the person or force behind this young mage, and even if they are determined to offend the imaginary master or force, they may not be able to obtain this secret method. Think about it, Rothschild has many secret methods to save his life. If he hadn't met Yufei's real body, he might have escaped, even if he faced an ordinary epic master, let alone this young mage. Therefore, after some discussion, several elders who were the actual rulers of the St. Child family issued an order to the Grand Duke Child to befriend Yufei. The Grand Duke Child naturally followed the opinions of several elders. Besides, Yufei cured his son, and the Grand Duke Child was very grateful to Yufei. He had already decided in his heart that, if Yufei was not going to take the earldom and the territory, he would do his best to meet Yufei's requirements. An hour later, Yufei walked out of the restroom arranged for him. The Grand Duke Child, who got the news at the first time, quickly rushed to where Yufei was, and discussed the remuneration with him. To the surprise of the Grand Duke Child, Yufei actually chose the earldom without making any other requests. It stands to reason that mages generally don't like to manage worldly affairs, which will affect their practice of magic. For example, the ancestral precepts of the St. Child family are that mages cannot serve as the head of the family and must concentrate on practice. However, Yufei was willing to accept the title of Earl, and Grand Duke Child was relieved. He knew that wizards often made some very strange requests, and granting an Earl title was just a small matter for the St. Child family. Just like that, without spending a penny, Yufei got the title of Earl after solving the problem he caused. Well, it's better to be beaten to death. I will continue to work hard for full attendance next month, and there will be more updates. Chapter 227 Selecting Territory. Yufei was relieved after solving the problem of the Earl title. He didn't expect that the problem could be solved so easily. It was a bit beyond Yufei's expectations. On Earth, titles are a very distant concept for ordinary people, especially ordinary people in China. Yufei never thought that he would be related to viscounts and earls. He didn't expect that he would become an earl in this alien world, which made Yufei sigh in his heart. Although he didn't have the familiar people and things on Earth, when he came to the alien world, the powerful power he had could allow him to obtain a position that was difficult to obtain before. With the identity of the Earl of the Holy Lion Empire, it would be much easier for him to do things next. However, looking at the huge map that Grand Duke Chilled placed in front of him, Yufei had a headache. Although Yufei had already stated that he didn't want the territory, Grand Duke Chilled insisted that Yufei choose an earldom as his fiefdom. Grand Duke Chilled did this naturally because he was hinted by his father and wanted to get along with Yufei, who was mysterious at every turn. After all, the status of an empty earl and a real earl is too different. A baron with corresponding fiefdoms is actually higher than an empty earl. The greatest desire of the court nobles of the royal family is to obtain a piece of territory and become a real noble. So on the issue of fiefdom, Grand Duke Chilled is very active. In his opinion, nobles who don't want fiefdoms are not good nobles, and Yufei's performance is just reserved. So although Yufei said that he didn't want the territory when he accepted the status of Earl, Grand Duke Chilled still brought a few servants and spread out a huge map in Yufei's room. This map not only shows the territory of the Holy Lion Empire, but also depicts the territory of the entire human world, and even includes the territories of some alien races. The territory of the Holy Lion Empire occupies about 1/7 of the map, located in the center. Looking at this map, Yufei couldn't help but curl his lips. Just like on Earth, every country likes to put its own country in the center when drawing a map. In fact, the center of Eslay should be the middle of the Warcraft mountains. My body is not far from the center of Eslay's. Shaking his head and retracting his thoughts, Yufei concentrated on the map in front of him. Although Yufei didn't want a territory because he was afraid of trouble, after understanding the difference in status between empty titled nobles and real titled nobles, Yufei decided that it would be better to have a territory. Otherwise, his goal would not be achieved. Although a noble without status also has some privileges, no one is willing to pay attention to him. Looking carefully at the map provided by Grand Duke Chilled, Yufei thought about it. On this map, the territory of the Holy Lion Empire is marked with some places in green. These are the territories that can be granted to Yufei. Of course, these are the results of Grand Duke Chilled's selection. Those territories that are too small or too barren have been eliminated. After observing for a long time, Yufei's eyes locked on 3 territories. Among the 3 territories, the first one is the most prosperous. It is located near the capital of the Holy Lion Empire and is at the feet of the emperor. Travelers and caravans coming and going to the capital often stop in this small town the night before going to the capital, so this territory is the most profitable place that the Saint Child family can provide. However, after careful consideration, Yufei is ready to give up this option. Although Yufei needs money to buy magic crystals to convert into energy so that the Night Elves can develop faster, he is very confident in the profits of the Night Elves' enchanted equipment. The income from this territory will probably only be a small part of it. Considering the geographical location, Yufei ruled out this territory in his mind. Although this small town is prosperous and the area of the territory is suitable for the status of an earl, it is too close to the capital of the Holy Lion Empire. The control of the imperial family must be strong, and it is not easy for him to wrestle equipment. If the royal family of the Holy Lion Empire finds it and then traces it to the Night Elves, he will have to face a powerful enemy in advance, which will disrupt his plan. After careful consideration, Yufei also ruled out the second relatively good territory. This territory is located on the border of the Holy Lion Empire, and it is where several countries meet the Holy Lion Empire. It is more convenient to wrestle enchanted equipment. However, this territory is located on the eastern border of the Holy Lion Empire, which is too far away from the Warcraft mountains, so it can only be abandoned. The last territory that Uferi likes is on the seaside. The main city of this territory is a seaport, located in the north of the Holy Lion Empire. It is one of the only non-freezing ports in the north of the Holy Lion Empire. What Uferi values is the sea transportation capacity of the seaport. Unlike on land, sea transportation not only has a higher volume, but also has stronger concealment. Countries can set up checkpoints on land, but they can't set up checkpoints on the sea, right? At most, they can only check at the seaport. Uferi doesn't care about the volume of transportation. He plans to get some space rings to transport goods. Magic crystals and the like don't take up much space. What he cares about is concealment. Transporting by sea can eliminate the worry of being discovered by human forces, and it is also more convenient in terms of distance and speed. You know, the northern ice field newly occupied by the Night Elves is further north to the Arctic Sea. Although the Arctic Sea will almost freeze in winter, and it is difficult to sail, it is still navigable for a long time in a year. It's just that the sea itself is more dangerous, and the Arctic Sea with extreme climate is more dangerous than ordinary seas. In addition, there is no oil and water in the northern ice field, so there has been no caravans going through the northern ice field by sea before. If it weren't for this, the Amazon tribe would not have to worry about food problems for more than 20 years. But this is exactly what Uferi meant. If there are no caravans taking this route, the chance of the Night Elves transport team being discovered will be much smaller, and the danger will be smaller. After enough magic crystals are delivered to the Night Elves through this route, the power of the Night Elves will expand rapidly, and then it will be time to sweep across the continent and seek the Heart of Eternity. Speaking of the Heart of Eternity, one of the components of this thing, the Heart of Light, is said to be on the crown of the Emperor of the Holy Lion Empire. Now that I have the identity of a Count of the Holy Lion Empire, I can be regarded as a minister of this Emperor. Isn't it a bit unkind to seek the jewel in the crown of my boss? After stroking his chin and thinking for a while, Uferi smiled calmly. He is a time traveler, and he doesn't have any awe for the Grand Duke, the Emperor, and the like. When facing Grand Duke Chilled, it is this kind of indifferent and unhurried momentum that makes Grand Duke Chilled not look down on this young man. Besides, Uferi doesn't think that his status as the father god of the Night Elves is lower than that of the Emperor of the Holy Lion Empire. Even the identity of this clone, the Elf King of the Night Elves, can be said to be equal to or even slightly higher than that of the Emperor of the Empire, so Uferi will not have any awe for his clone in the human world. Therefore, while thinking about the problem of the Heart of Eternity, Uferi has decided to find out the news of the Heart of Light. If it is true as the rumors say, that the Heart of Light is the jewel in the crown of the Emperor of the Holy Lion Empire, Uferi might have to become a pearl thief. It would be nice to play with the symbol of one of the greatest powers in the human world. I seem to have gone off topic again. Uferi came back to his senses from his trance and continued to look at the map in front of him. Suddenly, Uferi's eyes fixed on a location on the map. After closing his eyes and thinking for a while, Uferi put away the map and said to Grand Duke Chilled, who was sitting on a chair drinking tea and waiting for Uferi to choose a territory. "Excuse me, Grand Duke, I plan to choose Area 7 as my territory." Grand Duke Chilled was stunned for a moment, took the map handed over by Uferi, unfolded it and looked at it, and frowned. Area 7, the port in the north of the Empire. This location is not the best. Why did you choose here? Uferi smiled slightly when he heard the words. Of course, the Grand Duke opposite could not see it. "My Lord Duke, I have my own reasons for choosing this place. Since you told me to freely choose any territory on the map, it should not be a problem to give this port to a small earl like me." Upon hearing Uferi's answer, Grand Duke Chilled frowned even more, but soon relaxed again. He thought to himself that this young wizard had his own ideas for choosing this port as his territory, and it might be related to the masters or forces behind him. If he asked this young wizard to choose a better territory, he might be doing evil for nothing. With this thought, Grand Duke Chilled no longer bothered about the location of the territory chosen by Uferi. After handing the map to the servant who had been standing respectfully behind him, Grand Duke Chilled exchanged a few polite words with Uferi, and then left Uferi's room. After Grand Duke Chilled left, Yufei recalled the territory he had just chosen. Although Yufei was inclined to that port, because the sea route was favorable for the smuggling of the Night Elves, it was not this point that finally made him make up his mind. Just now, after a brief thought, Yufei looked at the map again, and found that this port had a unique advantage. This advantage was that this port was very close to a port of the Candela Business Kingdom Alliance. Chapter 228, How to Advance Heroes. According to the information Yufei got from the dwarf Gargant and the experience of his Elven King clone on the continent, the Candra Business Kingdom Alliance is a very powerful force. The status of the Candra Business Kingdom Alliance is similar to the combination of a weakened version of the World Trade Organization and a weakened version of the World Bank on Earth, and its influence in the entire SLAs is very large. For example, the Sonal Chamber of Commerce, which had some friendship with Yufei before, has its headquarters set up in the Candra Business Alliance, and its influence is not small. As for the trading capacity of the Candra Business Alliance, it is said that the Candra Business Kingdom Alliance even has trade with the Dragon Clan. This alone is unique in the human world. Yufei chose this port near the Candra Business Alliance as his territory, naturally wanting to have some intersection with the Candra Business Alliance. Although the Candra Business Alliance is powerful, there are many large and small chambers of commerce, which can be regarded as a mixed bag, and of course there is a lack of management. Many chambers of commerce even smuggled weapons to the Orcs when some human countries went to war with the Orcs, not to mention the wars between human countries. Many chambers of commerce in the Candra Merchant Alliance started out by making money from wars, including the Sonal Chamber of Commerce, which had a good relationship with Yufei's clone. It also rose from a war that affected several kingdoms, dozens of principalities and states. Even the members of the Candra Merchant Alliance dared to smuggle weapons to the Orcs, the mortal enemy of mankind. It seems that trading with the Night Elves is nothing to these chambers of commerce. Yufei's idea is to trade enchanted equipment and magic crystals through the Candra Merchant Alliance. Compared with trading directly with other countries, the people of the Candra Merchant Alliance will not ask about the origin of the goods. Even if the goods are of shady origin, as long as there is enough profit, some chambers of commerce will not have any scruples, and will even spontaneously cover up for the owners, because of their own interests. At that time, it will be more unnoticeable to sell enchanted equipment and purchase magic crystals in the areas affected by the war through the Candra Merchant Alliance. Therefore, Yufei chose this port named, well, no matter what it was called before. After becoming Yufei's territory, this port became O'Brien Port, and the port plus a large number of towns around it became O'Brien territory. After Yufei selected the territory, relying on the power of the Saint Chilled family, the documents of the ownership of the territory and the official documents of Yufei's identity as the Earl of the Empire, the incarnation of the Elf King, were soon handed over to Yufei. It stands to reason that what Yufei should do now is to go to O'Brien Port to receive his own territory, but he did not do so, but continued to be a guest in Chilled Castle. Since it has been decided to become the actual Earl of the Holy Lion Empire, it is necessary to find a supporter in the Empire. For Yufei, the Saint Chilled family, which has been favored by him, is obviously a good choice. The Saint Chilled family has a large enough influence in the Holy Lion Empire. If it can act under the banner of the Saint Chilled family, it will be more effective than an Earl without foundation. And because of the speculation about Yufei's identity, the Saint Chilled family is also happy to accept Yufei's goodwill. Although an Earl is nothing to the Saint Chilled family, in order to make friends with the so-called power behind Yufei, the Saint Chilled family is very polite to Yufei. During the days that Yufei stayed at the Saint Chilled family, Grand Duke Chilled invited Yufei to almost every dinner. Yufei, who intended to rely on the Saint Chilled family, would naturally not refuse, and he gladly participated every time. During these days, Yufei also had the idea of investigating the secrets of the Saint Chilled family, and even asked Maev, the watcher hidden in the dark, to go around the Chilled castle. However, the places Maev could go to were only some open areas. The defense of the real core areas was even more strict than that of the Palace of the Kingdom of Severn, and the anti-stealth facilities were also extremely complete. Even at night, relying on the permanent invisibility skill and the double invisibility of the Night Elves' innate shadow escape, Maev did not dare to move. After feeling the anti-stealth strength of the core areas of the St. Child family, Mayev's permanent invisibility skill was only increased by 1 level, which was actually equivalent to the invisibility ability of a thief who had just entered the legendary level. Even with the shadow meld talent, it would not reach the invisibility strength of an epic thief. The St. Child family was naturally not a place where a legendary thief could come and go freely, and it was not surprising that Mayev's investigation had not achieved any results. At the dinner, Euphony also met Rothschild, who had already woken up. Rothschild certainly didn't know that the nightmare he had encountered was actually brought by the body of the mysterious young wizard in front of him. After learning that Euphony was the one who repaired his spiritual world and woke him up from his deep sleep, he politely expressed his gratitude to Euphony. Rothschild seemed very interested in Euphony, a wizard of the same level who was probably much younger than him but much stronger. However, although Euphony was ready to make friends with the St. Child family, he obviously would not have too much intersection with the St. Child family if he accidentally revealed his true identity and was discovered by the St. Child family. It would not be fun. Therefore, Euphony could only decline Rothschild's enthusiasm. After finding excuses to reject Rothschild's invitation to study magic or go out for fun several times, Euphony finally felt annoyed. In addition, something happened to the main body, so Euphony bid farewell to the St. Child family on the pretext of going to the northern part of the empire to take over the territory. Euphony was going to take over his own territory, and the people of the St. Child family would naturally not stop him. So, after staying in Child Castle for 5 days, Euphony rode the Holy Giant Wolf, secretly protected by Maiev, and left the core location of the largest family in the Holy Lion Empire. The distance from Child Castle to O'Brien territory was not close. Just like the previous trip from the Seven Kingdom to the Holy Lion Empire, Euphony's main consciousness returned to the ancient tree of the main body, and the Elf King clone was carried by the Holy Giant Wolf to the direction of O'Brien territory, of course, in a straight line. Something really happened to the main body, but it was a good thing. After dozens of days of continuous practice, Yuan Mu Zhenju finally advanced. As soon as the main consciousness returned to the main body, countless information flows poured into Euphony's mind. This is because after the Yuan Mu Zhenju was advanced, Euphony's soul and the body of the ancient tree had improved their fit, and thus obtained more inherited memories. Without paying attention to other things for the time being, in countless information flows, Euphony was looking for the information that he was most concerned about, and that the two heroes under Euphony were most concerned about how to break through the bottleneck from level 5 to level 6. After browsing for a while, Euphony finally understood how the hero should be upgraded from level 5 to level 6. It turned out that the hero summoned from the altar, after reaching level 5, if he did not achieve an achievement, could only stay at level 5, and could not reach level 6 with the ultimate skill. And the achievements that each hero needs to achieve are different. For example, the achievement that the demon hunter Illidan needs to achieve is to hunt a demon creature that is not less than epic level. Cetus Hellbringer happened to be an epic demon creature, so after killing it, Illidan broke through the bottleneck between level 5 and level 6, and possessed the ultimate skill. At the same time as learning this information, Euphony also learned the achievements that the Moon Priestess Tyrande and the Watcher may have needed to achieve in order to advance. As a Moon Priestess, Tyrande's achievement is actually very simple, that is, to own a moon temple. This moon temple is not a building in the regular building sequence of Warcraft, but a special building. However, the construction of the moon temple still has to be handled by Euphony. A moon temple is synthesized by 10 moon wells. Maiev is similar to an assassin, and the achievement she needs to achieve is a bit like Illidan, which is to assassinate an epic magician. Epic mage. Euphony narrowed his eyes. There are very few epic mages on the continent. Most of them are famous. They either exist as the guardians of powerful kingdoms or the worshippers of the empire, or they have their own mage towers and are independent forces. They are not so easy to mess with. Maev's assassination of these mages is not only difficult, but the consequences will also be very serious. Euphony does not think that epic mages are so easy to assassinate. Even when Illidan killed the Hell Messenger Assets, it was not just his own strength. What's more, epic mages can also use their own power. Not to mention the epic mages in the Kingdom Empire. The power that epic mages with their own mage towers can exert is even more terrifying. Can Maiev not be promoted? It is very simple to build the Moon Temple, and Tyrant will be promoted to level 6 soon. Then the only hero left who can't be upgraded is Maiev. Maiev has been following her clone to protect the clone of the Elf King, and to explore various information in the human world. To put it in a cliched way, even if there is no credit, there is still hard work. It is really unfair for Maiev not to be promoted. But after a little thought, Euphenia's frown relaxed. The mages in the kingdoms and empires and the prominent mages with their own mage towers are not easy to mess with, but Euphenia just happens to know an epic mage who is easy to mess with. While escorting the Sonal caravan, Euphenia's Elf King clone killed a necromancer and read his memory, and then obtained the Flame Heart, one of the components of the Heart of Eternity. And in the memory of this necromancer, there happened to be a message from an epic mage. Chapter 229, Building the Moon Temple. Since it was the memory of a necromancer, the epic mages he knew were of course necromancers. This epic necromancer was none other than the head of the organization of the necromancer that Euphenia killed. After careful consideration for a while, Euphenia decided to put the chance of Maiev breaking through the 6th level of hero on this epic necromancer. At first glance, this epic necromancer seemed to be quite powerful, and not easier to bully than the mages in the Kingdom Empire or the epic mages who were independent forces, but the actual situation was not the case. Although this epic necromancer was also the head of a dark force on the continent, the professional characteristics of necromancers determined that they would not gather in groups. On the one hand, it was due to the character of the necromancer, and on the other hand, if they gathered in groups, the chance of being caught in one fell swoop would increase a lot. Necromancers were extremely unwelcome on the continent of Slays, and who knew if the skeletons they summoned would have their own ancestors? It can be said that anyone who has a little respect for their ancestors will not have a good feeling towards the necromancer. Because of these two reasons, although there is a certain degree of organization among the necromancers, and some leaders of the organization can also command low-level necromancers, each necromancer is generally alone. Epic necromancers are no exception. In this case, there is no need to consider the factors of power. The time required to hunt down an epic necromancer will definitely not be delayed until other necromancers can come to support. Maiev or the Night Elves only need to face an epic necromancer. Well, maybe we have to add the undead summoned by this epic necromancer. Euphenia is not going to let Maiev face this epic necromancer alone. The power of the Night Elves should not be wasted when Illidan broke through level 6. Maiev also made great efforts. In fact, this is one of the reasons why Euphenia chose the epic necromancer as his target. If you are hunting other epic mages, in addition to facing their own power, you must also guard against the potential forces behind the epic mages. If you are hunting an epic necromancer, if you don't know where he is, I believe many people are willing to kill an epic necromancer. From the apprentice level to the epic level, how many bodies that should have been buried have been ruined by this necromancer? Of course, Euphenia has also thought about using other forces to contain this epic necromancer, and then Maiev will assassinate him at a critical moment, so that the power of the Night Elves will not be used. However, although the necromancer is extremely unwelcome on the continent, knowing the trace of a necromancer will definitely lead to many self-proclaimed righteous people to wipe out the evil demon king, but the epic necromancer is not so easy to deal with. In order to eliminate an epic necromancer with countless powerful summons, even the big forces on Esras have to prepare well. And during this preparation time, the necromancers are not fools, and they will definitely get some information. Next, either the epic necromancer will move from his hiding place, or the necromancers will unite to start a world-shaking war. Neither of these two situations is what Euphenia is happy to see. Besides, the necromancer can exist on the continent of Slays for such a long time, and it must not be just the status that everyone shouts and fights. For example, the young CLO level necromancer killed by Euphenia was hired by someone. I don't think there are so many fools who are willing to waste their strength to deal with the necromancer and let their original enemies take advantage. As for relying on the power of the Night Elves to encircle and kill the epic necromancer and solve the problem of Maiev breaking through level 6, it will not be so troublesome. The Night Elves are not yet known to the forces on the continent, and of course any actions will not be leaked. However, hunting down the epic necromancer and allowing Maiev to break through the bottleneck are not things that can be done now. The first task now is to build the Temple of the Moon, let Tyrann be cleansed by the power of the Moon God, and break through the bottleneck between the 5th and 6th levels of heroes. Tyrann was the first hero summoned by Yuffie, and she was considered a veteran under Yuffie. However, more than 200 chapters, several months had passed, and Tyrann's strength had remained at level 5. Illidan, who was summoned much later than Tyrann, had reached level 7 some time ago. Not only Tyrann herself, but Yuffie was also anxious for Tyrann. Now that there was a way to solve the problem of strength, Yuffie was naturally happy for Tyrann, and could not wait to build the Temple of the Moon. In addition to 10 moon wells, the construction of the Temple of the Moon also consumes up to 50,000 units of energy, and 100,000 units of wood. After such a long period of mining, the energy and wood resources of the Night Elves have become very abundant. These energy and wood are nothing to Yuffie, so he consumed them very quickly and started the construction of the Temple of the Moon. It takes so much energy, and the Temple of the Moon will naturally not only have the function of allowing Tyrann to advance. According to the information in Yuffie's inherited memory, the Moon Temple's advancement of Tyrann is only an additional function after its appearance. In addition, the Moon Temple has many magical abilities. However, the compatibility between Yuffie's soul and the body of the ancient tree is still insufficient, and the description of the Moon Temple's functions in the inherited memory is somewhat vague. Yuffie was not frustrated about this. What functions are there? Wait until it is built and see, isn't it the same? And the information obtained by then will be more detailed and vivid. It takes a long time to build the Moon Temple. It takes a full 24 hours. After 24 hours, it is noon in the daytime, and there is no moon. So where does the magic of this Moon Temple come from? Yuffie was a little confused. Forget it, don't think about it, everything will be clear in time. Shaking his head, Yuffie stopped guessing, and turned to check the development of the Night Elves in the few days he was away. Although Yuffie was only away for a few days, the Night Elves, as a race in the fast-paced battle game of Warcraft, have developed at a speed that is not something that ordinary people can imagine. Before, the Night Elves conquered the northern icefield without wasting their strength, but directly conquered the Amazons, the snowfield bear monsters, and the Tuskers. At this time, apart from their own strength, the vassal forces of the Night Elves alone are not a small force on the continent, not to mention that the 3 descended races conquered by Yuffie are more helpful to the Night Elves in their own combat power. As for the Hill Dwarf Demon Slayer tribe that is attached to the Night Elves and the Amazons who follow the footsteps of the Night Elves wholeheartedly, after seeing the full power of the Night Elves, they also have their own roles. The Demon Slayer tribe is the excuse for the Night Elves to sell enchanted equipment in the future, and Yuffie is also preparing to use the Demon Slayer tribe to influence the Hill Dwarfs and even the entire dwarfs, a huge force. The Amazons are a smokescreen for the Night Elves to invade the human world, and the power of the Amazons themselves is also a benefit to the Night Elves. In a few days, several vassal forces stabilized, and their respective positions were determined under the arrangement of the Night Elves. The 3 vassal forces that newly joined the Night Elves, except for the shamans and shaman elders among the snow bear monsters and the auxiliary units among the Tusker people, the other forces of the 3 tribes remained in the northern icefield. After more than 20 years without contact with the human world, the Amazon tribe will definitely face a huge backlash when it enters the human world again. Therefore, although the strength of the Amazon tribe has increased significantly compared to more than 20 years ago, Yuffie still merged the members of the snow bear monsters and the Tusker people into the Amazon tribe except for the auxiliary units, in preparation for invading the human world in a while. In addition to the stabilization of the vassal forces, the strength of the Night Elves themselves has also been greatly improved. Although only the Magnato tribe was eliminated in the northern icefield, the experience gained from the previous battles to unify the Wind Whispering Forest and the continuous hunting of monsters in the past few days has improved the overall strength level of the Night Elves troops. Since archers and huntresses are now elite level, as soon as they are trained, the elite level ones account for 1/3 of the total number of these 2 arms. The other arms are only at the ordinary level when they are trained. so not many can be upgraded to the elite level, and most of them are at the elite level. Of course, arms such as raptor druids and elven dragons, whose strength is not mainly reflected in combat, have relatively few elite level ones. However, in order to improve the overall strength of the Night Elves, Uferi plans to let some arms that have reached the elite level and have full experience lead them to kill monsters and upgrade, so that arms that are not good at fighting and other arms that have not reached the elite level can also be quickly upgraded to the elite level. In other words, except for the captain and hero, all other units of the Night Elves will soon reach the overall elite level. Thinking about the satisfaction of having dozens of elite units under his command, when he just set out from the wind-whispering forest to the Warcraft mountains, Uferi couldn't help but be surprised at the speed at which the strength of the Night Elves expanded. Well, after combining with the vassal forces, the strength of the Night Elves has temporarily reached a peak. Then, it is time to attack the human world. Uferi made a decision in his heart. After Tyrande and Maya broke through the bottleneck of level 6, the Night Elves can begin to show their fangs to slays. When I finished writing yesterday, the dormitory had been disconnected from the internet, so I posted it this morning. This chapter is from yesterday, and there will be another chapter in the evening, which is for today. In the future, I will keep posting one chapter a day. If I miss a day, it should be the same as yesterday, and I will make up for it the next day. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 230, Moon God, Earth. 24 hours is not very long, but it seems quite long for Uferi who is waiting. However, no matter how long the wait is, there is always a time to wait. After 24 hours, the Moon Temple was completed as scheduled. The completed Moon Temple did not show any magical features. At most, the gorgeous appearance surprised Uferi. Uferi did not feel frustrated or puzzled about this. The information obtained from the inherited memory let Uferi know that the Moon Temple would not be special when it was just completed. Only after the chief priest of the Moon Temple is determined and stationed in the Moon Temple, the Moon Temple will really operate. The chief priest of the Moon Temple will certainly not be someone else. Uferi has already determined that it will be Tyrande. The reason why Tyrande can break through the bottleneck between level 5 and level 6 after the Moon Temple is built is precisely because she will serve as the chief priest of the Moon Temple. After being infused with the power of the Moon Temple and baptized by the Moon God, Tyrande can reach the strength of level 6. Although I'm a little impatient to let Tyrande advance, the Moon Temple was completed at noon. The inherited memory did not say that the opening ceremony of the Moon Temple must be held at night, but Uferi subconsciously prepared to wait until the moon was at its zenith before letting Tyrande preside over the opening ceremony of the Moon Temple. Soon, night fell. In the eastern sky, 3 bright moons gradually rose, and Uferi's body, the ancient tree, began to absorb the moonlight energy and convert it into energy value. Although the energy converted by the tree body is only a small energy income for the current Night Elves, it is better to have it than not to mention that absorbing moonlight energy is the instinct of the tree body, and Uferi cannot stop it. Over time, it is also a considerable gain. However, Uferi is not concerned about these now, but the Moon Temple. When the 3 moons are fully risen, under Uferi's instructions, Tyrande came to the Moon Temple built in the place where Uferi first landed with a solemn expression. Uferi did not get any information about the opening ceremony from the inherited memory, so he could not tell Tyrande what to do next. However, when Tyrande walked to the square in front of the Moon Temple, he naturally understood what he should do next. Tyrande, who was originally riding a white tiger, jumped off the white tiger lightly, crossed his hands in front of his chest, sang an unknown hymn, and walked step by step towards the interior of the Moon Temple. When Tyrande walked to the magnificent gate of the Moon Temple, the stone gate that was originally closed made a creak and opened by itself. Although the Moon Temple was built by Uferi's order, there was a mysterious force at work, and Uferi actually didn't know what the interior of the Moon Temple looked like. Now the gate of the temple opened in front of Tyrande, and Uferi also curiously used his mental power to follow Tyrann's figure into the moon temple and observe the situation inside. The layout of the temple was extremely simple, so simple that Eupheny felt a little stunned. Apart from a long corridor and pillars on both sides, there was only a small altar in the center of the moon temple. This altar was emitting a bright white light, and there was a statue on it. Eupheny's mental power focused on the statue. Is this the so-called moon goddess? The statue was obviously a female body, and the graceful figure made Eupheny admire it, even if it was just a statue. However, the face of the statue was smooth and had no facial features. This discovery made Eupheny's heart tremble. Could it be that this moon goddess has no face? Shaking his head and not dwelling on this, Eupheny looked at the background behind the statue. The background behind the goddess statue was a huge oval with many dark patterns on it. Eupheny didn't care about these patterns at first, but the longer his mental power stayed on this oval background pattern, the more Eupheny felt something was wrong. After a few seconds, after scanning the background pattern with his mental power again, Eupheny suddenly reacted. Eupheny originally thought that the oval background actually represented the moon, but after seeing the patterns on the oval clearly, Eupheny's discovery made him break out in a cold sweat. These patterns are actually a world map. That's right, on the oval background behind the moon god statue, the dark patterns combined together are a world map. This world map is of course not a map of the Slays continent, but a world map of the Earth. This is also the most surprising point for Eupheny. Well, this is Australia, this is Asia, and this is Africa. The more Eupheny looked at it, the more frightened he became. When he was in the 4th year of high school, Eupheny's geography was still good, and he certainly wouldn't make a mistake in the world map. The world map of the Earth is nothing, but isn't it a bit out of place to appear in this moon temple? Eupheny rolled his eyes secretly in his heart. However, at this time, there was no time for Eupheny to analyze why the world map of the Earth appeared in the moon temple. After entering the moon temple, Tyrann's expression seemed much more excited. But perhaps it was the requirement of the opening ceremony. Tyrant still maintained a solemn expression, singing a hymn softly. Eupheny didn't understand what Tyrant was singing before, but after discovering the world map of the Earth, Eupheny suddenly felt that the melody of Tyrant's hymn was very familiar. Tyrant sang the hymn in Elvish, and although Eupheny also knew Elvish, as a Chinese soul, he usually translated everything he heard into Chinese automatically, so he didn't understand what Tyrant was singing. Now, listening to the hymn sung by Tyrant in the Elvish language he knew, Eupheny suddenly found that it was a familiar song. The moon goddess is holy, beautiful, and brilliant, and her light shines on the earth. Oh my god. Isn't this ode to joy? Exclamation mark. Eupheny was speechless. What Tyrant was singing was the melody of Ode to Joy, and the lyrics were only slightly changed and sung by Tyrant in Elvish. Damn, this is not how a copycat is made, right? Just turn a goddess of joy into a goddess of the moon, sing an ode to joy. No, it's an ode to the moon, and it's considered the opening ceremony of the moon temple. Just as Eupheny was filled with mixed feelings, wondering what the relationship between the moon god and the earth was, Tyrant had already walked up to the altar and came to the statue of the faceless goddess. In front of the statue, Tyrant stopped singing, knelt silently on the ground, closed her eyes, and seemed to communicate with the statue in front of her. After a while, the statue of the faceless goddess gradually emitted the same white light as on the altar, and as time went by, the white light became stronger and stronger. When the intensity of the white light on the statue reached a peak, these bright lights suddenly seemed to decline and gradually dimmed. But a closer look showed that these lights did not dim for no reason, but poured onto the world map behind the statue. As the light continued to transfer from the statue to the world map that should have appeared as the background, the map also lit up. However, the part that lit up on the map was only the land, and the 4 oceans were still dark, as if to distinguish between land and ocean. Soon, all the light on the statue flowed to the world map. At this time, a mysterious force was entrenched on the map, and the statue of the faceless goddess seemed less eye-catching. When the light on the world map reached its peak, the white light on it suddenly projected out, reflecting a white ball of light on the top of the faceless goddess statue. As the ball of light gradually took shape, Eupheny quickly recognized what the ball of light was going to show. There was light and dark on the ball of light. Upon careful observation, the bright part was the land part of the earth, and the dark part was the ocean part. This was the world map behind the statue, but it became a three-dimensional version. So what this ball of light showed was the earth. And it was not a map, but an earth ritual. What is the relationship between this moon god and the earth? At this time, Euphenia's heart was full of questions. Why would the world map of the earth and even a three-dimensional model of the earth appear in this built moon temple? Moreover, the hymn to the moon god sung by Tyrant was actually adapted from Ode to Joy. Could it be that he was really a test subject thrown into the other world by some force on earth? Euphenia felt a mess in his mind. This trace of human intervention was too heavy. Just as Euphenia kept guessing what the truth behind this was, the ball of light floating on the statue's head changed again. After slowly rotating for a while, the ball of light emitted a soft light and shot towards Tyrant, who had been kneeling in front of the statue. After receiving the infusion of light, Tyrant seemed to be under great pressure. Her originally upright body gradually trembled, and her face, which had always been solemn, also showed a look of pain. Euphenia observed this scene indifferently, without any extreme reaction. If you want to gain power, you must pay a certain price. Pain is only one of the slightest prices. If you can't even bear this little pain, Tyrant will be unworthy of being a hero with the Night Elves, and naturally there is no value in training. I think after this infusion of light, Tyrant will be promoted to level 6, right? By then, the Night Elves will have a forbidden spell level large-scale lethal skill. In Warcraft, the falling stars are famous. However, of the soft light emitted by the ball of light, only a small part was infused into Tyrant's body. More light seemed to have crossed the distance of time and space, and appeared beside Euphenia's original body, the ancient tree, before Euphenia could react. Poof. There were still a few minutes before the network was disconnected. Fortunately, I caught up, and kept my promise. Chapter 231. Falling Stars. These lights did not stay around Euphenia's body for a moment. The next moment Euphenia found that they had somehow reached him. The light that came across the space from the moon temple sank into Euphenia's body. Euphenia was shocked. Although he knew that the mysterious light from the globe would not cause any harm to him, anyone who saw some unknown light entering his body like a monster would feel panic. Euphenia immediately gathered his mental power and entered his spiritual world. Sure enough, after those lights sank into Euphenia's body, they quickly entered the spiritual world. Not only that, Euphenia's spiritual world did not seem to be the purpose of the mysterious light. After they invaded Euphenia's spiritual world, they quickly rushed towards Euphenia's soul like a cat smelling blood. Euphenia was really shocked. A person's soul is his origin. If something happens to the soul, it will be much more serious than physical or mental trauma. After all, no matter how seriously the body is damaged, or how much the spiritual world collapses, as long as there is no problem with the soul, these are all brand new after reincarnation, and if there is a little defect in the soul, it will be an extremely serious problem. However, after knowing the seriousness of the problem, Euphenia tried every means to intercept the light that wanted to approach his soul, but all his actions failed to stop the mysterious light from approaching his soul. Finally, after the mysterious light ignored Euphenia's last mental barrier and wrapped Euphenia's soul, Euphenia temporarily lost consciousness and fell into darkness. Darkness, endless darkness. Euphenia could feel that he opened his eyes, but it was the same as if he had not opened his eyes, and he saw endless darkness. On Earth, Euphenia is actually a person who likes solitude. On countless nights, he stayed in his room, turned off the lights, and stared blankly in the dark, and he enjoyed this behavior. But that was different from now. When on Earth, although the lights were turned off, there was still some faint light, and although I was artificially in a lonely state, I knew that there were other people around me, and even outside the door besides myself. But now, Euphenia only felt the deepest darkness, and in this boundless darkness, it seemed that he was really the only one, or the existence of consciousness. Is there anyone? Light. I need light. Euphenia wanted to shout, but found that he couldn't make a sound at all. Is he going to fall into this eternal darkness? Euphenia was panicked. However, the surrounding space seemed to feel the request from Euphenia's soul, and gradually a little light permeated from far to near, from dark to bright. When these lights shone on Eupheni's body that he seemed to be unable to feel, Eupheni only felt a very comfortable feeling gradually spreading to all places where his consciousness could reach. This feeling is like returning to the time before birth, the incomparable sense of security and admiration in the mother's belly. Gradually, Eupheni's consciousness was overwhelmed by this feeling, and he seemed to merge with the surrounding light. After that, the gradually brighter light spread out to the surroundings, and Eupheni's consciousness also extended with the spread of the light. What is this? Eupheni saw a green sapling that seemed to be carved from jade. Does this thing seem to have some impression? Eupheni is now like a newborn. He seems to have forgotten the past, but he has some vague impressions. This green sapling is actually the tree infant formed after the Yuan Muzenchu he practiced was advanced. Eupheni, whose consciousness is in the newborn state, naturally doesn't care about whether it is a tree infant or not. His thoughts continue to spread with the light that contains the mother's breath. Outside the green sapling, there are strips of wood texture, and there are many fibers containing powerful energy. As consciousness spreads, Eupheni can feel that he seems to be closely connected with these textures and fibers. After Eupheni's consciousness spread to the furthest wood grain he could reach, the white light that had been accompanying him gradually faded and disappeared into the invisible. Eupheni also felt a sense of loss, as if his mother had left him forever. However, as the light faded, the memories that had been suppressed in the depths of his soul gradually returned. Life on Earth, the scene when he traveled through time, turned into a tree, and developed the Night Elves. Scenes of the scene flowed through Eupheni's consciousness like a revolving lantern. Eupheni suddenly opened his eyes that had been closed all the time. What happened to him just now? How could he suddenly lose all his memories and return to a newborn state? Eupheni, whose memory returned, felt extremely scared about the situation just now. The comfort of returning to the mother's body is indeed very nostalgic, but if it comes at the cost of losing himself and all his memories, Eupheni will never do it. Could it be the effect of the light flying out of the moon temple? Eupheni reacted. However, when he was about to check what happened in the moon temple, a discovery made him stunned immediately. How is this possible? Eupheni suddenly discovered that in the short period of time when he lost his memory, his soul had completely merged with the body of the ancient tree, and the degree of fit reached 100%. This means that Eupheni's soul is now like the original soul of the ancient tree, and Eupheni has all the inherited memories that the ancient tree can have. In Eupheni's mind, there is now a huge flow of information. For example, how to make further progress in elite level troops, why the head of the troops is much stronger than ordinary troops, how to collect soul crystals, etc. All the secrets of the Night Elves are known to Eupheni. Eupheni temporarily put aside these complicated information, because many of them can only be done after evolving to the eternal tree. What's more, Eupheni is most concerned about the situation in the moon temple. The mental power probed out of his body, and Eupheni suddenly found that his control of mental power was much smoother than before, and the awkwardness he had once had completely disappeared. Is this the benefit of the 100% fit between the soul and the body? This feeling of being able to sense everything in every cell and fiber of the body, and belonging to oneself is really wonderful. The vision in the moon temple has disappeared, and Tyrant is standing quietly in front of the moon temple. At this time, Tyrant's attributes have changed dramatically compared to before. After reaching level 6, the light in Tyrant's eyes is completely different from before. Although it was said that heroes have advanced wisdom before, the performance of several heroes is not so satisfactory. Now from Tyrant's smart eyes, it can be seen that now she is probably truly possessing advanced wisdom. This can be seen from the fact that the 2 skill points after reaching level 6 have been added to 2 skills by Tyrant herself. Her autonomy has improved a lot. Of the 2 skill points, 1 was naturally added to the ultimate skill Starfall without any surprise. This large-scale powerful killing skill has always been what Eupheni expected, but because of the bottleneck, it was the Demon Hunter's Demon Transformation skill that Eupheni saw first. The real version of Starfall is not like the game. Not only has the duration and the time interval between the stars falling changed, the real version of Starfall has a drastic change in the skill effect. In the Warcraft game, Starfall only has an effect on enemy units. Only when there are enemy units within the skill range of Starfall will stars fall down and cause damage to the enemy. but in reality, this is not the case when Starfall is cast. Yufei tried to let Tyrant release Starfall in an empty place. Although the name of the skill is Starfall, it is certainly impossible for real stars to fall, not even meteors, but star-shaped energy balls formed by energy. When Tyrant casts the skill, it is not that countless energy balls fall down, but that countless star-like energy balls are condensed in the sky within the range of the skill. Tyrant feels that she can arbitrarily control the energy balls suspended in the air and let them fall. Following her feeling, Tyrant commanded these energy balls to fall. Sure enough, Tyrant's mind moved, and the energy ball suspended in the sky fell down, and there was no enemy in the skill's range at this time. Boom. Boom. One energy ball after another exploded, and fell to the ground, making the ground bumpy and even shattering some large rocks. What would happen if this fell on a person? The human body does not have. Yufei knew that these energy balls looked powerful, but they were nothing in front of masters. Masters who have reached a certain level, whether warriors or mages, have enough means to protect themselves from the damage caused by these simple energy balls. However, a large-scale damage skill like falling stars was not originally designed to deal with masters. Its role is more reflected in large-scale legion battles. Although the falling energy balls do not have the ability to automatically distinguish between enemies and friends in the game, the person who controls the energy balls does. Tyrant can control these energy balls to fall where she wants them, and can even make many energy balls fall at the same point. This also means that the falling stars can still pose a certain threat to masters in a certain sense. After all, dozens or hundreds of energy balls fall on one person at the same time, and the explosive force cannot be resisted by ordinary protective measures. Chapter 230 To the Function of the Moon Temple. It is indeed the ultimate skill that I have been waiting for a long time. In addition to being a powerful weapon for group battles, it is also very useful against masters. In a sense, Tyrant's falling stars has a more significant effect on the strength of the Night Elves than Illidan's demon transformation. Tyrant's promotion to level 6 also means that Yufei's long-planned plan to attack the human world has come to an end. Although Maiev has not reached the level of level 6 among the 3 heroes under his command, the greater significance of Maiev's existence is not to exist on the front battlefield, but to lurk in the human world, to get information like now. Therefore, Yufei did not plan to wait until Maiev completed the achievement and broke through the bottleneck from level 5 to level 6 before launching an attack on humans. It has been several months since Yufei landed in the world of Esraz, and in these months, Yufei's strength has accumulated to the limit that can be achieved so far. The next step to enhance strength, in addition to finding other components of the Heart of Eternity, to synthesize the Heart of Eternity, so that his body can be upgraded to the Tree of Eternity, is to continue to mine energy mines to expand the number of arms. However, although the Whispering Wind Forest is not small, the energy mines are limited. Although there is a way to replenish energy consumption by hunting monsters to obtain magic crystals, this is not a long-term solution. In addition, although the Night Elves can be trained or exchanged with energy and wood, they need to fight one battle after another to upgrade from ordinary or elite level to higher level. Don't think that the initial Night Elves seem to upgrade quickly. That's because there are fewer people, so it is easier to get experience for upgrading. So of course they upgrade quickly. Now the number of Night Elves is calculated in thousands, so experience is naturally not so easy to get. Now the Night Elves all enter the Warcraft mountains to hunt monsters to obtain magic crystals and get the experience needed for upgrading. However, although the Warcraft mountains are large, the number of monsters is not unlimited, and there are even fewer medium and higher level monsters. The experience gained by thousands of Night Elves who are divided into several groups to hunt monsters in turn is really too little. If it weren't for the many battles they experienced when unifying the Whispering Wind Forest and conquering the Northern Ice Field, the current thousands of Night Elves would not generally have elite level strength. However, the experience required to upgrade from the elite level to the elite level is much more than that from the ordinary level to the elite level. In addition, new Night Elves are constantly being trained. It can be said that the level of the Night Elves has reached a stagnation period, and this problem is actually very easy to solve. Aren't there enough Warcraft? There are many humans. If the Night Elves launch an attack on human countries, humans will definitely not surrender so easily, and they will definitely resist. If they resist, there will be a battle, and if there is a battle, people will die. If people die, the Night Elves will gain experience. The Night Elves who have gained experience and upgraded will naturally be able to fight with humans better, gain more experience, magic crystals, and gold coins. What a good virtuous circle. As for whether the Night Elves can gain experience by killing humans, Ufeli has no doubt about this. During the time when Ufeli controlled the Elf King's clone to wander around the human world without Ufeli's meticulous control, the Night Elves who hunted Warcraft in the Warcraft mountains did make some mistakes. Because the Warcraft mountains near the Whispering Wind Forest were where the Night Elves developed, the Warcraft had been hunted almost completely. The Night Elves who could not find the Warcraft naturally explored further to find more Warcraft to hunt. In this way, the stall was spread out, and the encounter with human adventurers that Ufeli had worried about before finally happened. The Night Elves who found the human adventurers would naturally not let them go, and killed them like Warcraft. The Night Elves who killed these human adventurers were pleasantly surprised to find that their experience had increased a lot, at least compared to the Warcraft of the same level. The experience provided by human adventurers was more than half. This discovery made Ufeli secretly surprised. Although the strength of humans is generally not as strong as that of Warcraft, they cannot withstand too many numbers. Even if the average strength of the general human army is only 1 or 2 levels, the experience gained by annihilating tens of thousands or even hundreds of thousands of human armies is definitely more than the experience gained by the Night Elves hunting dozens or hundreds of level 7 or 8 Warcraft. 3 days later, just 3 days later, Ufeli made a decision in his heart. In 3 days, the Night Elves will show their fangs to the many races of slaves. But before that, there are still some things to do. Ufeli concentrated his mental power on the Moon Temple. Becoming a priest of the Moon Temple is a requirement for Tyrann to break through the bottleneck between the 5th and 6th levels of heroes. But the Moon Temple is not just for Tyrann to break through the bottleneck. Although Ufeli still doesn't understand what this so-called moon god is, and doesn't understand why the Moon Temple, which was originally built to help Tyrann break through the bottleneck, has a great impact on his own body, but Ufeli understands that this Moon Temple can bring him real benefits. And this is enough. According to the information obtained from the unlocked inheritance memory, the Moon Temple currently has 4 functions. One is that within the range of the Moon Temple's divine light, all Night Elves will be blessed with a divine spell, called the Moon God's Protection, which doubles the armor, and greatly improves the life recovery speed and magic recovery speed. The second is that within the range of the Moon Temple's divine light, the recovery speed of all the moon wells will be doubled, and it will not be restricted by the inability to restore the water during the day. In Ufeli's opinion, these 2 functions are completely formed for defense. Needless to say, the divine art of the moon goddess is protection. The recovery speed of the moon well water is also to enable the Night Elves to recover their combat effectiveness faster when foreign enemies invade, and there is no other meaning. Like Ufeli's plan to sell moon well water, it seems that the second function of the Moon Temple can provide great convenience, but if there are fewer moon well water, it's okay. If there are more, it will be easy to trace its origin, and the selling price will probably be much lower. At the same time, the so-called range of the Moon Temple's divine light is actually a circular area with the Moon Temple as the center and a radius of 100 kilometers. This is almost 1/3 of the area of the Wind Whispering Forest. Ufeli's attitude towards these 2 functions, brought by the Moon Temple, is neither good nor bad. If the Night Elves can easily eliminate the invading enemies, it doesn't matter whether these 2 functions are there or not. If the Night Elves cannot resist the enemy, this function may not be of much use. To put it bluntly, these 2 functions are only useful in a tug-of-war. Besides, the Night Elves have to take the initiative to attack, and there are not many opportunities to use these 2 functions formed for defense. Ufeli felt quite satisfied with the other 2 functions brought by the Moon Temple. The third function of the Moon Temple is that before the Night Elves go to war, the priests can pray and add a magic called the Blessing of the Moon Goddess to the troops through a ceremony. The effect of this magic is to increase the attack power by 10%, the attack speed by 10% and the movement speed by 10%. This magic is completely offensive. Although it can only last for 10 days, the group additional effect covers up this small flaw. Moreover, the magic effect of the blessing of the moon goddess can be superimposed with the magic effect of the protection of the moon goddess. In other words, within 100 kilometers of the moon temple, the night elves can be blessed by the two magics of the protection of the moon goddess and the blessing of the moon goddess at the same time. The first three functions are passive game types. Even if the blessing of the moon goddess is actively activated, it is just a state. However, the fourth function brought by the moon temple is completely different from the first three functions. The fourth function of the moon temple is to establish a moon goddess guard. The information in the inherited memory is somewhat vague about the description of this moon goddess guard. What Yufei notes is that this so-called moon goddess guard can only exist as a force to protect the moon priestess, except that it can move freely within the range of the moon temple's divine light. However, this moon goddess guard is a unit that has become more powerful after the elite night elves have undergone a ceremony in the moon temple and obtained the power of the moon goddess. Even if there are some restrictions, Yufei is very optimistic about it. Of course, the number of moon goddess guards is also limited, and this limit is related to the level of the moon priestess tyrant. Level 6 tyrant can have 60 night elves with the power of the moon goddess as guards. Although I don't know what the strength of the moon guard is, judging from the description and the inherited memory, it must be much stronger than the general elite soldiers, and may even be able to reach the strength of the chief soldier. 60 moon guards who are much stronger than the elite night elves can play a significant role on the battlefield. However, the inherited memory also shows that Yufei, the so-called father god of the night elves, cannot actually control the moon temple. At most, he can use the various functions of the moon temple through the moon priestess tyrant. This made Yufei secretly feel a little panic and alert in his heart. All along, everything of the night elves, no matter how big or small, has been under their control. But now there is something that they cannot directly control. How can Yufei not think about it? I'm still alive. The previous chapter should be the 230th chapter. It was written wrong. Chapter 233 Soul Crystal. Thinking of the vision that appeared to him when the moon temple was built and the inexplicably unlocked inherited memory, Yufei's uneasiness became even stronger. But after thinking about it for a long time, Yufei sadly found that he could not do anything. Even if he felt something was wrong, he still could not figure out the truth behind it because of insufficient information. Forget it. If you can't figure it out, don't think about it. Let's just care about what the night elves should do next. Attacking the human world is not just talk. The detailed plan and steps still need to be well planned. Moreover, before that, Yufei is also preparing to transform a part of the moon guards. Tyrant will appear as a war commander, and she must have a guard around her. However, Yufei's understanding of the moon temple is probably not as good as that of the moon priestess Tyrant, so Yufei handed the task of forming the moon guards to Tyrant. Anyway, it was originally to establish a guard for Tyrant, so of course it should be handed over to her. This is also considered decentralization of power. Yufei is making excuses for his laziness. After spending some time in the human world of Veslis with his clone as a human, Yufei discovered that after all, his soul was still a human, and some characteristics of humans were still difficult to get rid of, such as sociality. Although there were many night elves in the night elf tribe, what was Yufei's identity? The father god of the night elves. The communication between them was completely different from the communication between people. Although Yufei did not regard the people from the other world as human beings, they were still beings that could barely communicate. So now in terms of the night elves, Yufei was only a leader in the general direction, and he tried to delegate power to other heroes and soldiers such as Tyrant and Avril. It seems that being a hands-off shopkeeper is a common problem for all traversers. On the other hand, Yufei also hopes to cultivate the independent consciousness of Tyrant and other high-level elves of the night elves. Perhaps in this alien world, the only people Yufei can really trust are these night elves born by himself. Yufei hoped that one day, he could also find the feeling of living on Earth among the night elves, and this would require the night elves to gradually get rid of the situation where everything was arranged by Yufei. Although the specific matters of the establishment of the Moon Guard were handed over to Tyrande herself, Yufei was very curious about this special type of soldiers that had never appeared in the Warcraft game, so he secretly paid attention to the specific matters of Tyrande's establishment of the Moon Guard. According to Tyrande's current level, she can only have Moon Guard of 60 people. If a mere 60 people were mixed, it would not be of any use, so Tyrande selected 60 elite female hunters and formed a single type formation. After the 60 elite female hunters selected by Tyrande entered the Moon Temple, Yufei could no longer check their situation. But Yufei quickly found something to do, which was to sort out the inherited memories he had just acquired. After the mysterious events brought about by the Moon Temple, Yufei completely possessed the inherited memories of the ancient tree. In this huge information flow, Yufei began to look for the part that he was interested in. Now the strength of heroes such as Tyrande and Illidan has grown significantly, while the strength of the soldiers who could be comparable to the heroes in the early stage has now entered a stagnant period. For example, Avril, who was born by Yufei earlier than Tyrande, was not much inferior to the hero Tyrande in the early stage, but now she is far behind Tyrande. What Yufei wanted to find was a way to further improve the strength of Avril and other soldiers. I remember that, when she first came to SYNOPSIS, Avril mentioned something called soul crystals, saying that Night Elves with good qualifications can be transformed into special units through soul crystals, after reaching the elite level and full experience. In Yufei's opinion, I'm afraid that apart from heroes, the best qualifications of the Night Elves are the soldiers of each type. The information of soul crystals. Here, although Yufei now has all the inherited memories of the ancient tree, for him, these memories are like a library that belongs to him completely. He can only look them up when he needs them, instead of existing like his life memories. Soul crystals are obtained by killing strong men, and the limited conditions are that only strong men among non-magic beasts of wisdom can be obtained after being killed, and the representative creatures are naturally humans. I have also killed a cloud level necromancer with my own hands, which is also considered a strong man among humans. Why didn't I get the so-called soul crystal at that time? Yufei was a little confused. After checking the conditions for obtaining soul crystals in detail, Yufei couldn't help but shout that it was a pitfall. First of all, it is true that soul crystals are obtained by killing strong men, but in the eyes of ordinary people, strong men such as cloud level and sky level masters are not qualified to condense soul crystals. Yes, to obtain soul crystals, at least you have to kill legendary intelligent creatures. And this is not enough. Even if you kill a legendary or even legendary intelligent creature, the soul crystal will not appear automatically like the equipment dropped by killing monsters in online games. You have to use some means to get it. And this means, of course, consumes energy. But the consumption is not much to collect soul crystals from a legendary or higher level strongman. You need to consume a little elf. If a small elf is immersed in the body of a legendary or higher level strongman within 1 hour of his death, the small elf will gradually shrink and solidify to form a soul crystal. But then there is another problem. Although soul crystals can improve the talents of highly qualified night elves, it is not so easy. If the soul crystals extracted from the bodies or souls of legendary masters are primary soul crystals, then these primary soul crystals cannot actually be used to improve the talents of night elves. Only higher level soul crystals equivalent to those extracted from the souls of mythical masters can meet Yufei's requirements. Mythical master. Yufei resisted the urge to curse and silently raised a small branch in the middle of his branch to the sky. Damn, I have never seen a mythical master before. And are mythical masters so easy to kill? Extracting soul crystals requires 1 hour of death, so you definitely can't go to the grave to find the bones of the previous masters to extract them. But there are probably not many mythical masters on the mainland, right? How to get this high level soul crystal? Updating has resumed. This chapter has a few words, but it will be back to normal later. Chapter 234 Hippogriff Night Avril. Yufei thought about it carefully. In addition to humans, including various alien races, and even the demon world, I'm afraid that the number of mythical masters in SYNOPSIS is just in the double digits, right? However, there are more than 10 military leaders of the Night Elves, not to mention that there are other Night Elves with sufficient qualifications who also need higher level soul crystals for further improvement. This means that, even if Yufei kills all the mythical masters that may exist in SLAs, the soul crystals obtained are not enough for the Night Elves who meet the conditions to improve their strength. However, since killing legendary and epic masters will also get primary and intermediate soul crystals, what is the use of these low-level soul crystals that seem to be unable to improve the strength of the Night Elves? With a thought in his mind, Yufei continued to check the remaining memories about soul crystals. Sure enough, in the next memory he checked, Yufei found a way to solve the problem of insufficient high-level soul crystals. It turns out that the primary and intermediate soul crystals extracted from the souls of legendary and epic masters can be synthesized into high-level soul crystals. Calculated from the primary soul crystals, 3 primary soul crystals obtained by killing legendary masters can be combined into an intermediate soul crystal equivalent to that obtained by killing epic masters. Similarly, 3 intermediate soul crystals can be combined into an advanced soul crystal that can be used by Night Elves who have reached a certain qualification. This is asking me to catch all the masters of SLAs in one fell swoop. Yufei was a little speechless. However, it is much easier to find and kill legendary masters or even epic masters than to find mythical masters who are unknown where and not sure whether they can be defeated. At least Yufei, who has been in the human world for a while, knows that there are no less than 50 legendary masters in the entire human world, not counting the masters of alien races. Yufei had a little trick in his mind, only counting the masters in the open, there are about 120 humans and alien races. If all are killed, about 13 advanced soul crystals can be obtained. Although the number of epic masters has shrunk a lot, there are only more than 40 in the whole SLAs, but 3 intermediate soul crystals can synthesize a high-level soul crystal, which means that there can be 14 or 15. Calculated in this way, it is almost enough. I think there are not many Night Elves with sufficient qualifications except for the heads of each army. If you count the masters hidden in secret by various races and the powerful people above the legendary level that may exist in the demon world, the needs of the Night Elves can definitely be met. Khan, why does it mean that they are the public enemy of the alien world? Although it may offend all the races in SLAs, Yufei did not feel too much pressure. Not to mention that the Night Elves are originally an alien species that is out of place in SLAs. Yufei will offend several major races in SLAs, including humans, in order to advance his body to the eternal tree and collect the various components that make up the eternal heart. Yufei doesn't think that the races that have the 20th heart will hand it over easily. Just like the Emperor of the Holy Lion Empire may willingly hand over the Heart of Light on his crown. Obviously, the race that possesses the other components of the Heart of Eternity probably also regards the Heart of 20th as a treasure and can only obtain it through extraordinary means. And this so-called extraordinary means is naturally violent means. Yufei's favorite saying is violence cannot solve problems, but violence can eliminate problems. Even if it is the jewel on the top of the crown, it can probably be taken off when the country is in danger of extinction, right? It seems that he has gone off topic again, and Yufei's mind suddenly turned back. Now he is thinking about how to get something like Soul Crystal in order to let Maiev break through the bottleneck between level 5 and level 6 of heroes. Yufei is going to hunt down an epic necromancer. This epic necromancer can extract a mid-level soul crystal by itself, plus an epic undead summoned creature of the same level that must exist, so that 2/3 of the higher level soul crystal can be obtained. Next, either find another epic powerhouse, or find 3 legendary powerhouses to kill, so that Avril's strength can be further improved. That's right, Yufei is going to let Avril advance first. It's not just because Avril is the first Night Elf summoned by Yufei after he came to SLAs, but more because Avril's current strength is the strongest among all heroes. That's right, although the subsequent soldiers of the ancient tree level are much stronger than Avril in terms of attributes and skills, but after Avril rode the first summoned hippogriff and became a glorious hippogriff knight, Avril became the best master of the entire Night Elf tribe except heroes. Apart from other things, just an air advantage can make Avril look down on all enemies with weak air defense capabilities. In the Warcraft game, air advantage is not too obvious because generally units with long range attack capabilities can attack air. But in the real world, it is not like this. Although archers and magicians can attack air units, both arrows and magic have a certain range. As long as Avril flies the hippogriff outside the enemy's range, she is inherently invincible. Moreover, after merging into one with the hippogriff's chief, Avril's attributes and skills have changed significantly. First of all, Avril's range has been greatly improved. You know, Avril's range is far better than all Night Elf archers, and it has been further improved after riding the hippogriff. It can be said that now only Avril can attack others, and the attacked enemies may not even be able to find Avril. As for the field of vision, there is no need to worry. The eyesight of the hippogriff is very good, and with the wide field of vision in the air, it is difficult for an enemy to escape Avril's attack within the range of Avril. Secondly, although the health and armor of the hippogriff knight are not calculated as a whole like in the game, the hippogriff itself has much more health than the night elf archer, which can form a protective effect for the knight on its back. And this has greatly improved Avril's survivability. Finally, after Avril became a hippogriff rider, her skills were strengthened to a certain extent. Although she did not gain any new skills, her skills, which were much stronger than those of ordinary elite archers, became even stronger after being strengthened, and were no worse than some heroic skills. Just like Avril's original aiming and shooting skills, after being strengthened, they are comparable to the effect of Tyrant's second level lunar arrow, but the range is still a little worse. I'm sweating. Sorry everyone, I haven't updated for 2 days. Hanchan is now writing at night. The atmosphere at home was tense 2 nights ago, and I couldn't write, so the book will not be delayed, don't worry. Although Hanchan has been conceiving a new book, it is impossible for the first book of online writing to be abandoned halfway. Chapter 235 The so-called Moon Guard. If the first high-level soul crystal obtained is used on Avril, I'm afraid that Avril's strength can reach the level of a hero. That is, the Night Elves will have another epic combat force. Yufei doesn't know how much surprise Avril will bring him after using the soul crystal. Although the effect of the soul crystal may be good, it is not so easy to get. Yufei sighed in his heart. That's all the information about the soul crystal in the inherited memory. As for the effect, after using the soul crystal, we still have to find the answer from practice. After all, the effect of the soul crystal used by the Night Elves with different qualifications must be different. In addition, extracting the soul crystal also consumes a little elf, which is also a more troublesome thing. It's not that Yufei feels sorry for the little energy consumed by training the elves, but it's inconvenient. Think about it, if you want to get the soul crystal, you have to fight with at least a legendary master, and more likely to fight with an epic master. In this level of battle, it is really inconvenient to bring the elf into the team. Even with the current strength of the Night Elves, it is not an easy task to deal with an epic master. When fighting against an epic level warrior, even the aftermath is not something that a pure energy body like an elf can withstand. You know, although it seems like a good idea to place the elf in the distance of the battlefield, this method is limited to ordinary battles. At the epic level, the scope of the battlefield is not limited. Just like the epic necromancer that the Night Elves are preparing to deal with, I'm afraid that the battle at that time will turn over the entire swamp where the necromancer hides. It seems that we have to think of a way to ensure the safety of the elf. There is no way. This damn soul crystal must be extracted within 1 hour after the extraction target is killed, so the elf cannot be too far away from the battlefield. Trouble. Yufei frowned. Forget it. There is still some time before the necromancer is surrounded and killed, and we will think of a way then. Yufei's attention is no longer on the soul crystal at this time. After all, that thing is not easy to get. In the near future, there may only be one high-level soul crystal that can be used. More soul crystals can only be obtained after a full-scale war with humans. What distracted Yufei was naturally the 60 elite female hunters that Tyrant had selected before. During the time when Yufei was checking the inherited memory, these 60 female hunters also went through a mysterious ceremony in the Moon Temple and became the first batch of members of the Moon Guard. Yufei had no idea what kind of ceremony these female hunters went through in the Moon Temple, but from the huge changes that took place in these 60 female hunters, Yufei could see that, after becoming the Moon Guard, the strength of these female hunters had greatly improved. From the outside, the armor of the female hunters who became the Moon Guard has changed a lot. The standard armor originally exchanged from the Hunter Hall has now become much softer, and the connecting parts of the armor such as the shoulder blade, waist, and knees have a crescent-shaped ornament, and there are many complicated patterns with a hint of mystery on the entire armor. And the moon blades in the hands of the female hunters, whether they were originally red with fire attributes or blue with ice attributes, have now become silver white without exception, shining with a faint light. The mysterious power attached to it is much stronger than the power of the fire element or ice element before. After a slight hesitation, Yufei opened the attribute panel of these female hunters. As expected, the female hunters who were transformed into the Moon Goddess Guard had a small increase in basic attributes such as attack power, attack speed, movement speed, health and magic points compared to before. However, this increase in attributes obviously does not reflect the superiority of the Moon Goddess Guard over ordinary units. What makes the Moon Goddess Guard different from ordinary Night Elf units are several new attributes. Power of the Moon Goddess. The attack of the Moon Goddess Guard is accompanied by the power of the Moon Goddess, which can cause an additional 10 points of real damage to the enemy that ignores armor. Armor of the Moon Goddess. The armor of the Moon Goddess Guard is blessed by the Moon Goddess, which can reduce the 10 points of real damage received. These two, in fact, should no longer be considered as attributes, but have become two passive skills. In Yufei's opinion, it is no exaggeration to describe the effects of these two passive skills as powerful. The 10 points of real damage added by the power of the Moon Goddess may not seem much, but it makes Yufei more excited than adding 20 points of attack. No matter how high the attack power is, it will be weakened by armor and protection skills. For the real strong, they are not really afraid of the human wave tactics. The attacks of two low-level units cannot even break the defense, so what threat can there be, no matter how many there are? The 10 points of real damage of the Moon Goddess Guard that ignores armor is different. To put it in a broader sense, even when facing a mythical strongman, even if the attack of the Moon Goddess Guard cannot break the defense, it can still cause 10 points of damage to this strongman. And this is the confidence of the Moon Goddess Guard to participate in high-end battles between heroes such as the Moon Priestess and strongmen of equal strength. Let's talk about the armor of the Moon Goddess. In contrast to the power of the Moon Goddess, this attribute is aimed at low-end enemies. The armor of the Moon Goddess is not as simple as reducing the enemy's attack power by 10 points. It reduces the actual damage caused after calculating the reduction value of armor and skills. When dealing with human armies, the headache is actually the number of human armies that far exceeds that of Night Elves. Even if an ordinary human soldier can only output 7 or 8 points of damage, it is a terrifying data under the huge number. That's why Yufei now attaches great importance to the number of mountain giants. Mountain giants have the passive skill of hardened skin, which can effectively curb the human wave tactics, so they have become the first choice of the Night Elves vanguard. The attributes of the passive skill of lunar armor are somewhat similar to the hardened skin of mountain giants, but more powerful. As mentioned earlier, ordinary human soldiers can actually only output 7 or 8 points of damage, and this damage is directly exempted for the lunar guards who have lunar armor. In this way, on the battlefield, the lunar guards can rely on the lunar armor to ignore the attacks of many low-level enemies, and secondly, they can cause considerable damage to the enemies strong through the power of the lunar, which can really be regarded as a piece of ox skin candy. In addition to these two passive skills, the female hunters who have transformed into the lunar guards do not have any additional active skills, but the previous skills have been strengthened to a certain extent. But in addition to this, a new thing has appeared in the attributes of the lunar guards. Don't disbelieve me when I tell you this. My 6th cousin got married, and I was busy for 2 days. Now I'm updating quickly after I'm done. Speaking of which, how can I deal with my 7 cousins in this world? Chapter 236 Legion Skills and Bloodworms. After the active skills of the Moon Goddess Guard, several new things appeared. These new things are also skills, but they are all marked with the words Legion Skill after their names. Speed of the Spirits. Legion Skill. It requires at least 20 members of the Moon Goddess Guard to activate, and can add a 50% movement speed buff to at least 2000 units, which lasts for 1 minute. No consumption, 1 hour interval between uses. The number of units that can be affected increases with the number of Moon Goddess Guard members who activate the skill. Soul Link, Legion skill. It requires at least 40 members of the Moon Goddess Guard to activate, and can link at least 400 units. The damage received by the linked units can be distributed among these 400 units, transferring the damage, and the soul link lasts for 1 hour. No consumption, 1 day interval between uses. The number of units that can be affected increases with the number of Moon Goddess Guard members who activate the skill. Moon Goddess Advent, Legion skill. It requires at least 60 members of the Moon Goddess Guard to activate, and can absorb the power of at least 600 units to form a clone of the Moon Goddess to fight. The more units whose power is absorbed, the stronger the Moon God clone is, but the more units whose power is absorbed, the lower the increase in the Moon God clone's power. No consumption, use interval of 10 days. The Moon God clone exists for at least 60 seconds, and the existence time increases with the increase in the number of Moon God Guard members who use the skill. Legion skills. This thing does not exist in the inherited memory. Yufei shook his head and began to analyze the 3 new skills. Needless to say, Elf Speed is a pure acceleration skill. It's just that the number of units affected and the speed of increase are somewhat amazing, which can play a significant role in large-scale battlefields. At the critical moment, with this 50% movement speed bonus, whether it is position adjustment, pursuit, or escape, the Night Elves can appear to be at ease. Soul Link seems to have no effect at first glance. After the Soul Link, the damage is not reduced. In terms of the total amount, the linked unit will still receive the same amount of damage, but this skill is not just that simple. First of all, the transfer of damage can allow the tank that attracts enemy attacks in front of the troops to persist longer. When applied to the Night Elves, it makes the mountain giants more resistant. By transferring the damage suffered by the mountain giants to the rear troops, linked to their souls, the mountain giants can absorb more firepower. The archers and other troops in the rear are already very difficult to be attacked by the frontal enemies because of their long range, so there is no danger in sharing the damage of the mountain giants. Moreover, you can safely use the group recovery skills to heal the units that share the damage in the rear, which is much more convenient than concentrating on healing the mountain giants that attract firepower. In addition, Yufei has a very dirty idea. If his idea is realized, the endurance of the Night Elf troops can be greatly improved. There is also the skill of the Moon Goddess's Descent. In Yufei's opinion, this skill can actually be called a divine possession, but it is just a clone. The skill description of the Moon Goddess's Descent is relatively vague, and Yufei does not know the strength of the Moon Goddess's clone, but this skill can become a trump card in the battle with the mythical powerhouse of S-Laser. The power of the 3 Legion skills is not fixed. As the number of Moon Goddess Guards that launch the skills increases, the more units will be affected. For example, if 60 members of the Moon Guard activate the Elf Speed at the same time, they can buff 6,000 units to increase their movement speed by 50%. Although the number of Night Elves is about the same now, the Legion skills are very powerful in terms of data, but the effect in actual combat can only be reflected when fighting with humans. TSK. Yufei smacked his lips. This Moon Guard can be called a strategic force. Whether it is fighting against masters alone, or in large-scale Legion operations, it seems to be very powerful. It can be regarded as a trump card of the Night Elves. However, Yufei has a different idea about the Soul Link skill, and is ready to test it. The Soul Link skill explanation says that the linked units can freely share the damage they receive, which means that the damage can be concentrated on one unit. Although this is a death sentence for ordinary units, there are always some special creatures that can take on this task. Yufei's plan is to tame a kind of monster called Bloodworm in the Monster Mountain range and join the Soul Link team. This kind of magic beast called Bloodworm is of a very high level and is considered a high-level magic beast. Generally, adult bloodworms are at level 7, which is equivalent to the level of the sky. But in fact, this kind of magic beast has no combat power. The appearance of the bloodworm is the same as its name, a blood-colored flesh worm, but it is larger in size. This magic beast looks fleshy all over, and its only way of attack is to use two equally fleshy tentacles to push the enemy, but this way of attack is obviously not very powerful. And because it is an insect magic beast, the bloodworm does not have anything like shells and fur on its body, and its defense is also very low. It can be said that, if the combat power of level 7 magic beasts is ranked, the bloodworm is definitely the bottom one. But God, since the god of Warcraft has closed a door for the bloodworm, he must have opened a window for it. The only advantage of the bloodworm is that its vitality is extremely tenacious. The damage caused by ordinary attacks to the bloodworm is negligible compared to its total life. The tenacity of the bloodworm's vitality is also reflected in its extremely amazing life recovery speed. Even if a powerful enough attack causes a bloodworm to inflict a wound that is terrifying to ordinary people, it can recover to its original state in a very short time. To kill this kind of monster, in addition to using extremely powerful attacks, to concentrate firepower in a short period of time, you can only use the grinding skill to gradually wear down the bloodworm's energy and kill it. However, killing a bloodworm can only get a blood magic crystal that ordinary people can't use at all, and you can't get even a little material. In addition, ordinary adventurers are also unable to kill this difficult monster. Bloodworms can be regarded as a relatively moist monster in the Monster Mountain range. However, when Eupheny set his eyes on bloodworms, it meant that their good days were over. Euphemy's plan was to use the bloodworm's strong vitality and the characteristics of extremely fast life recovery speed to share the damage for the Night Elves who were in the front of the battle, to attract firepower through the effect of Soul Link. In Euphemy's eyes, this kind of monster with strong vitality and fast recovery speed is a mobile blood bottle that can be reused. It would be a shame to not catch it and use it. The skill of Soul Link. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 237, Preparing for War. Soul Link can link up to 600 units, and if the vitality of a bloodworm is quantified, it can be comparable to that of a dozen mountain giants. As for their life recovery speed, it should be hundreds of health points per second. If in a battle, the mountain giant troops that attract firepower in front and dozens of bloodworms are connected by Soul Link, then the mountain giants can really be used as a city wall. With a front line like a city wall and good attack capabilities, the long-range advantage of the Night Elves can be perfectly exerted. There are still 2 days before Eupheny plans to launch an attack on humans. It is just right to capture and tame some bloodworms in the Warcraft mountains in these 2 days. In this way, the Night Elves can have a greater advantage in the battle with humans. The task of catching bloodworms is naturally given to Tyrande, the moon priestess who has just successfully advanced, and her lunar guards who have just completed the transformation. Although the ability of the lunar guards is more reflected in the battle of large armies, Eupheny still wants to see their strength. Under Euphemy's order, Tyrande briefly explained to Avril the various matters of the Night Elves in the Whispering Wind Forest, and then led the Moon Guard to the Warcraft Mountains. The Night Elves now are not like before, with only a few cats and dogs. In addition to the thousands of Night Elves themselves, there are also vassal races such as the Derinal and the Tusker who live in the Whispering Wind Forest. As the leader in public, Tyrande has a lot of things to deal with all day long. Especially during this period, the Night Elves are about to step out of the Whispering Wind Forest and prepare to go to war with human countries, so there are more preparations to be done. At this time, when leaving to do other things, Tyrande naturally has to explain the various matters of the Whispering Wind Forest clearly and find a reliable person to manage the Whispering Wind Forest during her 2 days away. Eupheny now rarely interferes with the internal operations of the Night Elves, and only occasionally makes decisions on matters such as military training. In addition, most of the Night Elves are now elite Night Elves, so the Night Elves have gradually developed into a small society or a small country. In the entire Night Elf tribe, Eupheny, the mother tree, is undoubtedly the highest in status. In other words, Eupheny should not be placed in the social class of the Night Elves. As the source of the birth of all Night Elves, Eupheny is more in the position of a god. Under Eupheny, there are naturally 3 heroes. Tyrande is the patriarch of the Night Elves, who is in charge of all matters of the Night Elves. Illidan is like a legion leader, responsible for leading the Night Elves to hunt monsters, so that the Night Elves can gain experience and advance, and at the same time, obtain magic crystals to contribute to the construction of the Night Elves. Maiev Shadowsong has always been with Euphenia's clone, the Elf King, and plays a role of a right-hand man. In this case, if Tyrande leaves, it is naturally impossible to hand over government affairs to Illidan, who manages a military, and Maiev is not in the Night Elves. The affairs of the tribe can only be managed by the first level below the hero, the soldier leader. As the first Night Elf summoned by Euphenia, the father god, Avril's status in the Night Elf tribe can be said to be no less than the three heroes. In addition, she has been with Tyrande, and is familiar with how to deal with the current affairs of the Night Elves. It is best for the Night Elves to be managed by her after Tyrande leaves. Tyrande was away for 2 days. During these 2 days, Avril's performance was quite satisfactory to Euphenia. Although she has never handled so many affairs independently, Avril managed the Night Elves in an orderly manner in these 2 days without any chaos. This also made Euphenia feel relieved about the management of the Wind Whispering Forest, when Tyrande led the army to fight against human society. When Tyrande returned from the Warcraft mountains, in addition to the soldiers she took away, when she set out, she also brought back more than 50 lumps of bloody Warcraft. These bloody lumps of Warcraft are naturally the bloodworms that Euphenia has set his eyes on. The bloodworms have been captured, and Avril has also arranged other preparations for the Night Elves to fight in the human world in the past 2 days. Today is the time for the Night Elves, who have been lurking in the Whispering Wind Forest for 3 or 4 months, to show their strength to the Slays continent. The Kingdom of Severn, the first target of the Night Elves, will usher in endless smoke and war. It was noon. It had been sunny for several days in a row, but today, the sky suddenly turned cloudy, and there was no sunshine even at noon. Originally, Euphenia was going to cross the desert east of the Whispering Wind Forest, to attack the human world at night. After all, the Night Elves have a great advantage in fighting at night, but after thinking carefully, with the current strength of the Night Elves, they don't need to care about this advantage. After all, the first target is just a small principality. After a period of development, the Night Elves army now has 1,500 elite archers, more than 700 elite female hunters who have been transformed into heavy armor units, and a full 100 mountain giants. In addition to these main combat arms, there are 150 and 50 claw druids and 50 raptor druids respectively. In terms of air force, in addition to the original red dragon and now the purple dragon reared, the Night Elves now have 200 units of horned hippogriffs. These horned hippogriffs are divided into 20 teams, each of which is commanded by a horned hippogriff knight. There are also 20 elven dragons mixed in the horned hippogriff troops as a unit to deal with the human mage troops. And this is only the troops of the Night Elves who are preparing to fight in the human world. The Night Elves also have 4 vassal races, the Derenor, the Snowfur Monster, the Tusker, and the Amazon. As for the dwarves of the Demon Killer tribe, Euphenia is not prepared to let them participate in the battle with the human world. The 3 descended races of the Derenor, the Snowfur Monster, and the Tusker are mainly to provide auxiliary units for the Night Elves. Although the combat units of these 3 tribes are also strong, they are not organized after all, so Euphenia has no intention of using them to fight. But the Amazon tribe is different. As a native race of Slays, the Amazons had come into contact with human countries before, and there were many frictions and conflicts. When the Night Elves of the Whispering Wind Forest were still gathering, the Amazons had already entered the human world a day ago. Chapter 238 Changes in Maya City. Let's go back to 1 day ago. Maya City is a small city in the northwest of the Principality of West. More than 20 years ago, Maya City was not called Maya City, but Maya Fortress. As for who this fortress is aimed at, the answer is self-evident. More than 20 years ago, before the wild forces of Warcraft descended on the Whispering Wind Forest in the northern ice field, the current Maya City and the former Maya Fortress were the places where the Principality of West used to resist the invasion of the Amazons. After the arrival of the wild forces of Warcraft, the Amazons were blocked in the northwest of the northern wilderness. Many of the surrounding human principalities and states that were often plundered by the Amazons miraculously discovered that the Amazons, who used to come to plunder or directly take tribute from some weak countries every year, no longer appeared. At first, the surrounding human countries were still a little confused, but when the trade route of the Whispering Wind Forest was in the stage of the descending wild forces of Warcraft, and the powerful creatures that appeared on the northern icefield, the humans understood it. It's not that the Amazons don't want to plunder human countries, but the route to invade human countries is blocked, so they can only sigh helplessly. After 4 or 5 years, seeing that the Amazons have never broken through the blockade of those powerful creatures that suddenly appeared, the surrounding human countries gradually relaxed. The Principality of West was originally a relatively powerful one among the surrounding small countries, so it unscrupulously abolished the military establishment of the Maya fortress and turned it into an ordinary city. However, after 20 years, Maya City today is about to suffer a catastrophe. At the gate of Maya City, Mike was alone, leaning on his spear, guarding the gate listlessly. Damn Jace, he ran away to have fun alone, leaving me here to guard the city gate. Tomorrow, I must let him guard the city gate alone, and I will go home to rest. Muttering in his mouth, Mike glanced at the city wall again, but found that there was no soldier standing guard on the wall. These lazy guys must have gone to the tower to drink again. I'm the only one who has a hard time, Mike complained, but he was just complaining about the soldiers of the city guard who made him stand guard alone. He didn't think there was anything wrong. There was no way. Maya City was transformed from the previous Maya fortress. When the Amazons often ravaged the surrounding human countries, it was still a military stronghold, but the Amazons had not appeared for 20 years, and the geographical location of Maya City was relatively remote. Usually, there were really few people coming to Maya City from other places. The city guards of Maya City were actually composed of some rich children in the city. No one thought that Maya City still needed an army, and these rich children were also allowed in by their parents, in order to give them an identity in the system. Therefore, the laziness of the Maya City guards can be imagined. Looking at the city gate, that no one had passed for a long time, Mike couldn't help but complain. This Maya City is really a remote place. There are few caravans coming here. There is no future for development. Mike, who was thinking about whether to tell his parents that he wanted to develop somewhere else, did not notice that a lot of dust was raised on the road in the distance. At this time, the soldiers guarding the city on the tower were huddled in the tower drinking and chatting. Naturally, no one noticed that the danger was approaching. Mike was thinking about the feasibility of developing elsewhere, but suddenly felt some slight vibrations on the ground. What's going on? As the amplitude of the vibration became larger and larger, Mike finally came back to his mind from thinking. Looking up at the dirt road extending from the city gate, Mike's pupils shrank instantly. Enemy attack. A shrill roar broke the peace of Maya City. The Lord of Maya City, Count Maya, hurriedly ran out of his concubine's room in dishevel and shouted to the equally panicked guards of the Earl's mansion. What happened? Who issued the enemy attack alarm? But the guards of the Earl's mansion did not understand what happened, so they could only report to Count Maya, saying that a guard had gone to check the situation. Count Maya straightened his appearance. After all, the dignity of a noble should be maintained. However, although the Count calmed down on the surface, he was full of thoughts in his heart. The current Lord of Maya City inherited his father's title and became the Lord of the city 10 years ago. Although he still had some vague memories of resisting the invasion of Amazons when Maya City was still mere fortress when he was young, but the Amazons have not appeared in the vision of humans for 20 years, so naturally no one would associate them with the Amazons for a while. Walking slowly into the hall of the city lord's mansion and sitting on the throne of the city lord, Count Maya frowned tightly. What kind of enemy attacked this city of almost no value? Maya City is very remote and there are no borders with other countries around it. Could it be that the monsters attacked the city? But since 20 years ago, there has been no monsters stepping out of the wind-whispering forest behind the desert west of Maya City. Could it be that those powerful creatures that suddenly appeared in the legend came to attack the city? If this is true, Maya City is in danger. Since Maya Fortress became Maya City more than 10 years ago, the 3rd Legion of the Principality of West that was originally stationed here has been transferred. Now the military force of Maya City, apart from those city guards who are not worth using, is only the guards of the Earl's mansion. Those powerful creatures that suddenly appeared can even trap the Amazons that are raging in the surrounding countries in the northern icefield. If those creatures really attack Maya City, I'm afraid that Maya City will have no power to resist. Thinking of this, Earl Maya has begun to order his trusted subordinates to pack up and prepare to escape at any time. At this time, the guard who went out to get information from the Earl's mansion finally came back, but the panicked posture of rolling and crawling made everyone frown secretly. The guard who was getting information did not care about other people's eyes at this time. He rushed into the hall of the city lord's mansion in a panic and came to the seat of Earl Maya. Seeing the embarrassed appearance of his guard, Earl Maya's brows that had not been relaxed were locked tighter. "How can you be so flustered?" After scolding, Count Maya slowed down his tone and asked the guard, "What's going on?" The guard who was trying to get information calmed down temporarily under Count Maya's scolding, but the news he heard made everyone's face change drastically. "Count, run away. The Amazon tribe and some strange monsters have already invaded the city." Chapter 239 The Last Resistance. If this was said by another young guard, Count Maya might still be suspicious. But the guard who went out to get the news was the guard of the Earl's palace when the former Earl Maya was still alive 20 years ago. He was very familiar with the power of the Amazons back then, so what he said now would not be a lie. But, haven't the Amazons appeared in front of humans for 20 years? How come they suddenly appeared in Maya City today? Exclamation mark. Before everyone in the hall could react to this news, waves of shouting and killing had already approached the city lord's mansion, the Earl's mansion, in the central part of Maya City. How come so fast? Exclamation mark. Everyone was shocked. But listening carefully, this so-called shouting and killing was wishful thinking of everyone in the hall. Listening carefully, what came from outside the city lord's mansion was actually just waves of human soldiers crying and fleeing. That's right. The Amazons were once a powerful force that threatened the surrounding countries. Even when the 3rd Legion of the Principality of West was stationed in the Maya fortress, it was barely able to resist some of the Amazons' intrusions. With the current strength of Maya City, it is completely unable to resist the edge of the Amazons. What to do? What to do? Count Maya was in a state of confusion. But the Amazons obviously did not give Count Maya more time to think. The sound of the city guards fleeing had quickly reached the outside of the city lord's mansion. The Amazons' goal was very clear, and they wanted to go straight to Huanglang. After a little hesitation in his heart, Count Maya gritted his teeth and gave up the idea of escaping. Although he had ordered his confidants to pack up their belongings in advance, the speed of the Amazons' advance was so fast, and he was not a strong professional. Even if he escaped, he would probably be chased before he could get far. Moreover, even if he escaped by chance, Grand Duke West would not let him go. You know, the current Grand Duke West is not as kind as the old Grand Duke West. Let's see if our guards can resist the Amazons. If we really have no power to resist, then maybe we can choose to think of the Principality's policy towards Maya City over the years. Count Maya had an idea that he shouldn't have. Mike panted rapidly, feeling that his lungs were about to be torn in half. Mike was lucky. Although he was the first soldier to discover the invasion of the Amazons, he immediately gave up his duty of guarding the city gate. After shouting enemy attack at the top of his voice, he ran back to the city. Are you kidding? There are so many alien races and monsters that are so powerful at first glance. How can a small black iron warrior resist them? The other soldiers guarding the city gate neglected their duties and went to have fun. He couldn't even close the heavy gate of Maya City by himself, so how could he resist the enemy? Now Mike felt that his choice was wise. The city guards who ran out after hearing their own alarms foolishly waved their weapons at the terrifying aliens and monsters, but were instantly torn apart by the upright white giant bears that rushed to the front. After being chased by the Amazons for a while, Mike suddenly discovered that the target of these aliens was the city lord's mansion. With a quick thought, Mike quickly flashed into an alley after getting out of the sight of the Amazons at a corner. Hearing the alien troops roaring through the empty streets outside, Mike let out a long breath and then hurriedly took a shortcut to his home. The Amazon elder who led the team was very puzzled. He remembered this city. 20 years ago, the Principality of West was considered a relatively hard bone among human countries. It was difficult for a small group of Amazon warriors to break through this fortress, and it was not worth it for the whole tribe to press on. The Principality of West was a country slightly far away from the Amazon settlement. If the ancient elves had not ordered them to attack from the Principality of West first, the Amazons would not have chosen this place as a breakthrough point. But this, well, I remember it was called the Maya Fortress. Isn't the Maya Fortress so different from the one 20 years ago? Exclamation mark. The seemingly solid city walls did not cause any obstacles to the Amazons and the snow bear monster warriors who assisted the Amazons in the attack under the command of the ancient elves, because the city gates were wide open. After entering the city, the well-equipped human warriors made some of the veteran Amazon warriors who had attacked here feel a chill in their hearts. However, the performance of these human warriors later made the nervous Amazons laugh and cry. These human warriors did not care about the difference in numbers at all, nor did they arrange any formations, and just rushed towards the charging snow bear monsters in a daze. In order to ensure the smooth attack of the Amazons as the vanguard of the Night Elves, Eupheli sent ordinary snow bear monsters, snow bear monster warriors, snow bear monster trackers and several powerful snow bear monster user warriors to the Amazons. As for the two shaman professions among the snow bear monsters, they stayed in the army of the Night Elves themselves as auxiliary troops. The few snow bear monsters who rushed to the front did not give face to the human soldiers who wanted to wrestle with the bear monsters, and ruthlessly tore them to pieces. However, in the subsequent march, these bear monsters who were aroused by bloodlust had no chance to vent. The streets of the huge Maya city seemed as if robbers had just walked by. There were only scattered items on the ground, but no one. As early as when the alert mic shouted that the enemy was attacking, the few pedestrians on the streets of Maya City fled home or looked for hiding places. Only those city guards who were drunk and confused would rush up to fight bravely with unknown enemies. The Amazon elder only expressed a little surprise that there was no one on the streets of Maya City and continued to lead the troops forward. What the vanguard of these ancient elves had to do was to quickly control this city as a bridgehead, and they didn't need to worry about anything else. Just like the young human soldier who thought he was safe after escaping the sight of the Amazons. In fact, it only took a high-level Amazon warrior a javelin to kill him, but now controlling the city is the top priority. In the city of Maya, chasing some awakened city guards, the Amazons and the snow bear monsters seemed to be in an empty space. There was no one to stop them, and they soon came to the outside of a tall wall. And outside the mansion of the person who was obviously the most powerful person in Maya City, the Amazons finally saw some decent resistance. A group of well-equipped human warriors, whose momentum was much stronger than the previous human soldiers, formed a battle formation and blocked the gate of the Maya City Lord's mansion. It's a little late today. Chapter 240, Unstoppable. The soldiers lined up in front of the city lord's mansion were naturally the guards of Count Maya. These guards were not like the fools in the city guards who relied on connections to get official status. Many of the old guards were soldiers who defended the city when Maya City was still Maya Fortress. It was just that, because they were not included in the 3rd Legion, they had to become the guards of the Count after the status of Maya Fortress declined. Although these guards were not many in number, only 100 or so, their lowest strength was black iron level warriors with ranks. In the entire Slays continent, the troops composed of black iron warriors were considered very elite. However, facing the Amazons and bear monsters on the opposite side, these elite warriors still felt their legs trembling. At this time, Count Maya was completely disappointed. In front of him were thousands of Amazon warriors and hundreds of white bear type monsters that were extremely powerful at first glance. No matter what, Maya City was just a small city, and the strongest person in the city was just a cloud level swordsman. This cloud level swordsman had fled directly when he noticed something was wrong before. How can we resist such a large army with only 100 guards under our command? With a sigh, Earl Maya waved his hand to signal the guards to make way and walk to the front of the team with heavy steps. Then, the Earl with the highest status in Maya City bowed deeply to the Amazon troops. When Illidan led the vanguard of the Night Elves across the small desert east of the Whispering Wind Forest and entered Maya City, the elves could only see the streets that were cleaner than Sister Feng's face, and the pairs of terrified eyes reflected from the door cracks in the rooms on both sides. Eupheli sighed in his heart. I didn't expect this first step to go so smoothly. The defense of Maya City was too weak. Even after the capture of Maya City, because Maya City was too remote, the news that the city was breached could not be spread to other places for a while. The young COO level swordsman who escaped before was killed by a legendary Amazon pitcher with a spear through his heart, and he didn't get far. Since the news will not leak out in a short time, there is no need to rush to other places in the human country. It will be more effective to act together after the Night Elves troops are fully mobilized. Yes, Ufei is not going to attack one city after another. There are more than 10 small human countries to the east of the Wind Whispering Forest. Each country has a few cities and more than a dozen cities. If you attack one city after another, even if you march quickly and capture 2 a day, it will take nearly 2 months to conquer these small countries. Anyway, compared with these small human countries, the strength of the Night Elves and their affiliated races is already unmatched in any way. In this case, it is not impossible to divide the troops into several or even more than 10 routes to fight at the same time. Apart from anything else, even if the troops are divided into 20 routes, the Night Elves can ensure that each route has at least one legendary strongman in the team. Among the surrounding human countries, only the Principality of West and another human principality each have a legendary strongman. Each team is responsible for a city, which can be easily captured anyway. The actual situation was just as Ufei had imagined. 3 days later, after the troops of the Night Elves and the affiliated races such as the Derinal and the Tusker were all mobilized, Terran divided these troops into 10 teams and spread out from the city of Mi, each looking for a city to start the attack. Although the geographical location of Mi City is remote, this is because the surrounding terrain is difficult for ordinary people to pass through. The Night Elf troops are all strong units, so naturally there is no need to consider the terrain problem. They directly cross those swamps or hills and attack the cities of other human countries. As for the rest of the Principality of Wester, except the city of Mi, it was handed over to Illidan. Illidan led 500 Night Elf archers, 300 heavily armored female hunters, 20 mountain giants and other auxiliary units, and several glaive throwers. Compared with other teams, Illidan led more troops after all. The Principality of Wester was one of the most powerful countries among the nearby small human countries. Of course, this so-called strongest country was still not enough under the iron hoofs of the Night Elves, or arrows and moonblades. Like other teams, the troops led by Illidan broke through several cities in the Principality of Wester, as if they were in an empty land. In just 5 days, more than 10 small countries east of the Whispering Wind Forest were full of smoke. The powerful strength of the Night Elves was displayed to humans for the first time. Within 5 days, the Night Elves conquered 87 cities of humans and looted countless golden magic crystals. These golden magic crystals were quickly transported to the Whispering Wind Forest with the stolen space rings and converted into energy through the Tree of Life to train the Night Elves, so that the number of Night Elves increased. For the Night Elves, it was actually very easy to capture human cities. The advantage of defending the city does not exist at all when the opponent does not have legendary combat power. The seemingly thick city gate, the strong with legendary power, has countless ways to easily break through, not to mention the existence of mountain giants and glaive throwers among the Night Elves. However, after conquering the city, the greedy people had no good ideas for the management of these occupied territories. In the end, Ufei couldn't stand it anymore and gave Tyrande an idea: order. Every time the Night Elves conquered a city, they would plunder the golden magic crystals in the city and transport them back to the Whispering Wind Forest. The subsequent management was handed over to the humans themselves. If the previous ruler of the city was more sensible, the previous ruler would continue to be in power. If not, they would be directly killed, and the deputy would be in power. After that, the Night Elf team would go out in full force and head to the next city to conquer. In the cities that were conquered before, only one Hippogriff Knight was left in each city for supervision, and the others were not interfered with at all. Ufei mobilized the Night Elves to invade the human world in order to obtain more resources. After plundering the resources, they only needed to have a nominal right to rule the territory, and the rest was not important. As human cities were constantly conquered, the number of Hippogriff Knights was also increasing. In order to ensure the safety of the inspectors, mobility was obviously the most important, and the Hippogriff rider was undoubtedly the best choice. The Night Elves on the Hippogriff had high intelligence, and as an aerial unit, the Hippogriff was not easily threatened by humans. While other Night Elf teams were still attacking the few remaining human-controlled areas in the surrounding areas, Illidan encountered a little resistance for the first time. Chapter 241. Powerless Resistance. Illidan's obstruction was unexpected but reasonable. The Duchy of Wester had a total of 12 cities. Illidan had previously conquered 11 cities in Wester, leaving only the capital of the duchy, Hartlepool. Outside of Hartlepool, the Night Elf team led by Illidan was stopped in their triumphant march because of insufficient numbers to completely block the news. After conquering several cities, the invasion of the Night Elves, or the Amazons, which was ostensibly a cover, had been known to all the surrounding human countries. The rulers of the cities in the Duchy of Wester were no exception and all learned the news. After these rulers realized that this suddenly appearing alien team was not something they could resist, Illidan did not encounter any decent resistance in the other cities he attacked, after conquering 3 cities. This does not mean that the rulers in those cities surrendered to the Night Elves in a timely manner, but that they all made a strategic transfer. As for the destination of the transfer, it is Hartlepool, the largest and most well-defended city in the Duchy of West. At this time, outside Hartlepool, 80% of the military power of the Duchy of West is concentrated, including the 4 major legions of the Duchy of West, and the garrisons in various cities, except the 4 cities such as Maia City are concentrated here. Although it is only a duchy, the current Grand Duke of West is an ambitious duke. Since taking office more than 10 years ago, the 7th Grand Duke of the Duchy of West has worked hard to govern and actively build the army. He is a typical hawk. It is precisely because of this that the military strength of the Duchy of West is second to none among the nearby human small countries. With the 4 major legions and the garrisons of each city, the Duchy of West has nearly 20,000 standing troops. This is a very amazing number for a duchy with a population of only over 1 million. In a feudal society with low productivity, the ratio of standing troops to civilians reached 1 to 50, which is indeed a relatively high ratio. Therefore, what Illidan is facing now is more than 15,000 human soldiers. It's time to show real skills. No, it should be. It's time to show real strength. Although he only led about 1,000 troops, Illidan did not take the 15,000 soldiers gathered by the Duchy of Wester with all their strength into consideration. But the ruler of the Duchy of Wester obviously didn't think so. Outside the city of Hartlepool, 15,000 human soldiers had surrounded the team led by Illidan, and the swords and arrows flashing with cold light had been aimed at the Night Elves, who seemed to be quite scarce in number compared to the human army. Illidan was also careless, or he didn't care at all, and plunged into the encirclement of the human army. He didn't expect that these humans would give up the advantage of defending the city and air to fight a field battle with the Night Elves outside the city. Do they think that the suppression of numbers can make up for the gap in strength? In fact, Illidan was thinking wrongly. Although the Night Elves were advancing with great momentum, the current Grand Duke of the Principality of West was a person who was more inclined to centralization. After more than 10 years of operation, the strength of the nobles in the cities of the Principality of West was greatly weakened. Therefore, in the eyes of Grand Duke West, the Night Elves troops were just bullying the city guards of the cities and the Principality because they were too weak and were not very strong. In the face of these not very strong invaders, the always strong current Grand Duke of West would naturally not make a cowardly move of defending the city. The current Grand Duke of West looked very complacent. In the eyes of this Grand Duke who had been implementing a policy of separatism since he came to power more than 10 years ago, these invaders who were not very strong were obviously unable to make any waves after being surrounded by his army, which was more than 10 times the number of the enemy. This Grand Duke, who was very confident in his own strength, had already begun to calculate how to seize more power in this incident. Perhaps he could also seize some territory from other small countries around him in the name of expelling foreign races. Grand Duke West, who was lost in his beautiful imagination of the future, did not notice that among the surrounded aliens, a beautiful night elf had already stared at him with a cold gaze. This night elf was Avril, who had conquered the Principality of West with Illidan. Originally, Avril had always been with Tyrant, but now the Night Elves had to leave a horned hippogriff knight as an overseer every time they occupied a city. The Principality of West was one of the two strongest small countries around. After it was conquered, a higher ranking overseer was naturally needed. Avril was in the team led by Illidan, just to serve as an overseer after the Principality of West was conquered. But this did not mean that Avril would not participate in the battle. In the few previous battles, Avril almost always killed the leader of the opponent with her excellent archery skills before the battle began. And this time, the Grand Duke of West, who was surrounded by people and dressed gorgeously, naturally became Avril's target. Concentrating and calming down, Avril slowly pulled the longbow in her hand. Swish, an arrow flashing with deep blue light seemed to cross the distance of time and space in the astonished eyes of countless people, and sank fiercely into the body of Grand Duke West, who was as dazzling as the sun in the crowd. Then, this arrow, which even the legendary swordsman who served as a worshipper beside Grand Duke West could not react to, did not bring a trace of blood on Grand Duke West, but bang. Grand Duke West's body exploded into a ball of blood mist. Being in a high position, Grand Duke West's body was naturally not very strong, so under Avril's powerful arrow, he could only die in this horrible way. TSK. Avril is too violent. Killing a person is so unaesthetic. Directly shooting people into pieces. Yufen's huge mental power allowed him to see clearly the surprise, unwillingness, and other emotions revealed in Grand Duke West's eyes before his death. This made him sigh a little. It was really a pity that the Emperor's ambitions were in vain, and the hero was defeated. In the future, he didn't know how many human emperors with unfulfilled ambitions would die at his hands. At this time, while the human soldiers were shocked by the sudden death of Grand Duke West, Illidan led his troops to launch a counterattack against the human army that surrounded them. Chapter 242, Power Disparity. Although the enemy in front of them was dozens of times their own number, in the eyes of Illidan, the leader, the Night Elves, and even the vassal race auxiliary units, these so-called elite human soldiers were nothing more than chickens and pottery dogs. Facing the attack initiated by the Night Elves, the human soldiers were also a little panicked. Their king had just been killed by these hateful tribes in public, which was a serious blow to morale. Fortunately, although the high-level officers were panicked by the sudden death of Grand Duke West, and were anxious to consider their own safety in the gains and losses of the king's death, the middle and low-level officers still firmly followed the previous battle plan, to shrink the encirclement of the counter-charging Night Elves. These soldiers, who were only trainees or even ordinary strong men, did not know what they were going to face. They just raised their weapons in the shouts of their superiors to the charging aliens on the opposite side. Because they didn't know the strength of the Night Elves, and the army of the Principality had been promoting that the enemy's strength was not strong in the past few days, the lower level soldiers didn't think there was anything scary about the Night Elves charging towards them. They even pointed fingers at some of the Night Elves who were at the forefront. These aliens are so thin. I can knock down these aliens with thin arms and legs with one knife. The strong human soldiers were very disdainful of the slender Night Elves. However, the Night Elves who seemed to be moths to a flame at the forefront soon changed in a way that shocked and even frightened the humans. The originally slender Night Elves gradually grew larger in size while running quickly, and were soon surrounded by clusters of khaki light. Just as they were about to rush to the front of the human army, the Night Elves at the forefront transformed into huge brown-yellow giant bears. Big Earth Bear? Some of the accompanying mages in the army shouted almost like groans. Ordinary humans don't know them, but mages are generally knowledgeable scholars, so they can naturally recognize some of the more famous monsters. It's over. The head of the National Mage Corps of the Principality of West dispersed the magic power that had just gathered, muttered, loosened the staff in his hand, and fell to the ground. The Earth Bear is a powerful legendary monster, and there are more than dozens of Earth Bears in front of them. Ordinary human soldiers also gradually became uneasy. Although they didn't know these huge brown bears, their huge size had already brought them a lot of pressure, not to mention the 20 mountain giants that followed behind the Earth Bears transformed by the Claw Druids, which made the ground tremble when they walked. Under the command of the lower level officers, the human army gradually formed a formation. The archers in the back also bent their bows and shot countless arrows at the Earth Bears that were getting closer and closer. At the same time, they all swallowed their saliva, and the tower shield soldiers in the front row inserted the solid tower shields into the ground fiercely, and the spearmen behind them also raised their spears diagonally upwards. This is the most reasonable preparation to deal with the enemy's charge. However, these earth bears transformed by the claw druids did not continue to charge forward after approaching the human army. These brown-yellow giant bears stopped about 30 meters away from the human formation. The earthy yellow light on their bodies made the arrows of human archers either break or bounce off. Almost at the same time, 50 earth bears transformed by the claw druids roared and slammed their 100 front paws on the ground. The ground suddenly began to shake under the huge force of so many giant bears, as if a small earthquake had occurred. However, this secondary disaster alone was obviously difficult to cause any damage to the elite human army, and the earth bears did not think of defeating the enemy by slapping the ground. 3 seconds after the 50 earth bears slapped the ground, a terrible scene occurred in the human soldiers' formation that was still swaying left and right. Countless sharp stone spikes suddenly drilled out from the ground, piercing the bodies of human soldiers one by one, bringing countless blood flowers. In just 5 seconds, the human army, which was originally in a strict formation, turned into a hell on earth. The square formation with nearly 3,000 human soldiers turned into corpses hanging on stone spears. There were also wailing sounds lingering over the stone forest, or the corpse forest. This was actually the 50 claw druids who activated the earth spear magic after transforming into earth bears. It was too easy for the magic of the 8th level magic beast to deal with these human soldiers who were just apprentices or had not yet entered the rank. Soon, the stone spears that drilled out from the ground retracted into the ground, and the ground, where the human army was originally located, became extremely flat again. However, the human soldiers who were originally standing on it had turned into a pile of blood and mincemeat, causing endless fear in the hearts of other humans. These were 3,000 elite soldiers. In just a few seconds, they disappeared in front of everyone, and the casualties of the other side were 0. Yes, the earth bears all had the earth protection magic, and the long-range attacks of humans could not even hurt them. After dealing with the well-organized human army at the front, the earth bear, which had stopped charging, took advantage of the shock and fear of the other human armies, and launched an attack on the human army further behind with its 4 sturdy legs. 20 mountain giants followed closely behind, waving their huge tree trunks and rushing towards the human soldiers. After the mountain giants, there were 200 female hunters. The female hunters, who had become heavy army units, could play a big role in the front battlefield, instead of just existing as rangers as before. As for the largest number of Night Elf archers, they stayed in place with some auxiliary units of vassal races, and began to pour arrows on the human army, whose morale had dropped to the freezing point. The wind archers used their super shooting skills to snipe the middle and lower level officers who showed up in the Duchy of West's army. The lightning archers started the lightning combo, pouring arrows at 200% of the original attack speed, and from time to time they used scattered shadow shooting to split more arrows. Although there were only 500 Night Elf archers on the field, the long-range offensive they formed was more powerful than the 5,000 archer army of the Principality of West. With the long-range firepower support of the Night Elf archers, the Earth Bears, Mountain Giants, and Huntresses quickly rushed into the human army and started a massacre. Chapter 243, The Response of the Severn Kingdom. That's right, it was a massacre. Whether facing the Earth Bear transformed by the Claw Druid or the Mountain Giants who were more burly than the Earth Bear, the attacks of the human soldiers had almost no effect. The Mountain Giants were fine, as some of the gold and even cloud level warriors in the human army could still knock some stone chips off them. Although these stone chips were like dandruff for the Mountain Giants, they still had some effect after all. As for the Earth Bears, the humans were really desperate. Whether it was long-range arrows or long spears, whether it was dozens of soldiers slashing at the same time or the masters of the army making a strong attack, they had no effect in front of the thin layer of khaki light film on the Earth Bears. With the female hunters' troops following closely behind, the army of the Principality of West finally collapsed. Because Ufeli spent a lot of energy and wood to turn the female hunters into heavy army units, these seemingly fragile elven knights were as hard to be hurt as the mountain giants and earth bears under the swords and arrows of the human army. After all, The mountain giants and earth bears in the front row attracted more damage. In terms of output, the total number of 300 female hunters with heavy armor is actually much higher than the mountain giants and earth bears, which add up to less than 100. You know, in addition to being equipped with light heavy armor, the elite female hunters are also equipped with magic moon blades with either ice or fire attributes. Coupled with the output of the Night Elf archers in the rear, which is comparable to 5,000 human archers, under the example of some great nobles who fled with their private armies first, the human army gradually evolved from a small retreat to a full-scale rout. Although the Night Elves are strong enough to crush the army of the Duchy of West, they are far behind in number. During the pursuit, due to the lack of manpower, 40% to 50% of the human soldiers finally fled to the capital city of Hartlepool. At this time, Hartlepool was the only city among the surrounding human countries that had not been captured by the Night Elves. In addition to Hartlepool, another relatively powerful principality in the surrounding area had also been captured by the Night Elf troops. Of course, from the perspective of humans, it was all under the clutches of the aliens. Of course, this last stronghold occupied by humans will not produce many heroic figures like in the legends, thus turning defeat into victory and repelling the aliens. Under the ravages of the Night Elf glaive throwers and the mountain giants that turned into siege mode, Hartlepool was quickly conquered. However, unlike other cities, Hartlepool, as the largest city among the surrounding small countries, was designated as a temporary base by Tyrant and other Night Elf leaders. After leaving a Horned Eagle Knight in each city, the Night Elves and the alien vassal troops from other routes gathered in Hartlepool city. 3 days had passed since the Night Elf troops stepped out of the Whispering Wind Forest. The war in the western part of the human world was not known to the entire human world, but some of the surrounding kingdoms also knew about the war. However, Eufena's strategy of blocking the news obviously worked. In various cities, the puppet rulers supported by the Night Elves implemented various controls and spread a lot of false news. This made the news detected by other human countries completely different from the actual situation. For example, the intelligence system of the Kingdom of Seven received news that the Amazon tribe, which had not appeared for more than 20 years, reappeared in the vision of human countries with strength several times stronger than before. As a long-standing enemy, the surrounding kingdoms did not react excessively. After all, the Amazon tribe had many frictions with those small human countries in the past, and it was normal for them to come back and brush up their presence now. Among the surrounding kingdoms, the Kingdom of Seven had the strongest control over the small countries in the east of the Whispering Wind Forest. In the eyes of other kingdoms, the most anxious one is the Kingdom of Seven, so these countries are happy to wait and see. As for the Kingdom of Seven, although there are some more radical voices in the court, more ministers are seeking stability. In the Palace of Dundrum, the royal city of the Kingdom of Seven. Following the sharp announcement of the eunuch, an old man in gorgeous clothes walked into the royal study of the palace. Behind the desk in the room, sat a middle-aged man with silver hair. This middle-aged man is naturally the current king of the Kingdom of Seven, Ninth. The ruler of one of the most powerful kingdoms in the human world, second only to the three empires, looked up at the old man who walked into the study, smiled, then turned to the eunuch beside him and frowned, saying, "Prime Minister Edward is here, but don't you know to move a seat?" The eunuch immediately moved a chair in panic, placed it on the left side of the desk, and respectfully asked the old man to sit down. The old man did not refuse, and sat on the chair, after tidying up his clothes. Then, the study fell into silence. After a while, 7/9 spoke first helplessly. "Your Excellency, Prime Minister, you are indeed very composed." Prime Minister Edward, who had been sitting on the right-hand side of the king with a blank expression, smiled slightly and looked at 7/9. "Your Majesty, it's not that I'm very composed, but I know that your Majesty has probably already made up his mind. I'm afraid that summoning me to see you is just to announce your Majesty's decision, so I will naturally not speak first," Prime Minister Edward said with a smile. 7/9 smiled helplessly. "It turns out that the Prime Minister knows me best." After a pause, King 7/9 asked the Prime Minister, "Then Prime Minister, guess what my decision is?" Prime Minister Edward cleared his throat and said, "Actually, from our point of view, the Amazons are indeed aliens and enemies of mankind, but they are still very useful to us. More than 20 years ago, when the Amazons were still active in the area of the Duchy of Wester, the Duchy of Wester was not as strong as it is now. Because of the threat from the Amazons, those small countries had to rely on stronger countries, and our country, which is closest to these small countries, and has strong strength, is naturally their first choice. A look of reminiscence flashed across the Prime Minister's face. Although the small countries represented by the Principality of West were not strong individually, the combination of many countries can bring a lot of benefits to our country every year. In order to be less or even not disturbed by the Amazon, those small countries secretly subordinated to our country. Therefore, the late king had the ambition to establish the fourth empire of the SYNOPSIS continent. But after the Amazon tribe disappeared from the human world more than 20 years ago, everything has changed dramatically. Without the threat of the Amazon, those small countries have gradually escaped from our control. Especially the Principality of West. After the two Grand Dukes who can be called ambitious and wise, their strength has been able to catch up with some weak kingdoms on the continent. Upon hearing this, 7/9 stood up, walked out from behind the desk, and paced in the study with his hands behind his back. Prime Minister Edward also temporarily stopped talking, and looked at the king. That's right. In recent years, those small countries have become more and more arrogant, especially the Principality of West. Last time, I took advantage of my 50th birthday to test how much influence my country still had on the surrounding small countries. Who knew that the Principality of West actually only sent a special envoy, who was not even a member of the royal family? The Prime Minister also concentrated, and said in a deep voice, with great strength, ambition will naturally arise. We originally wanted to crack down on those small countries in the West, but we couldn't find a reason. The comeback of the Amazon tribe is actually a good thing for our country. 30 years ago, every time the Amazon tribe invaded human countries, it was actually a time for the Kingdom of Seven to make a fortune. Those small countries did not have the strength to drive away the Amazons, so they could only ask for help from the Kingdom of Seven. The Kingdom of Seven would naturally not help those countries in vain. They would only send troops to drive away the Amazon tribe after privately confirming some agreements. Sometimes the Kingdom of Seven would even deliberately indulge the Amazon tribe to plunder in those small countries that did not obey the kingdom's orders in order to deter other principalities and states. After the Amazon tribe disappeared, there was naturally no such good thing. The Amazon's comeback is naturally a delight to the old ministers who know the situation back then. Only the newly appointed young and strong ministers would clamor in the court to send troops to teach the foreign races a lesson. Humph. 7/9 snorted coldly, his eyes cold. Let's not worry about the Amazons for now. The more lessons those small countries learn this time, the more they will rely on our Severn Kingdom in the future. When I control them all, I will be able to realize my father's ambition back then. Prime Minister Edward stood up from his chair and bowed deeply to 7/9. Your Majesty is wise. Then the monarch and minister smiled at each other, and the Severn Kingdom's attitude towards the war in the western small countries was determined. However, what the two monarchs and ministers did not know was that this foreign invasion was not as simple as the Amazons' comeback. The Amazons were just a smokescreen released by the Night Elves. After expanding their power with the resources of many small countries, I'm afraid that the Severn Kingdom will not have the opportunity to respond at all. Although Yufei did not know the resolution of the Severn Kingdom, he was not worried at all. There is no other way. With the great efforts of the puppet rulers, the gold in the treasuries of the human small countries and magic crystal energy stones and other items that can be converted into energy have gradually gathered in the wind whispering forest. In just 3 days, the strength of the Night Elves has more than doubled compared to when they first stepped out of the wind whispering forest. Even if he were to conquer the Seven Kingdom now, Yufei would have some confidence. But of course he would not choose to do so. The existing resources are enough for the Night Elves to develop in a short period of time. Only with stronger strength can they set off a bigger storm in the SYNOPSIS continent. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 244. First arrival at the territory. While the Night Elves conquered the small countries east of the Whispering Wind Forest, Euphena's elven king clone rode a sacred giant wolf and brought Maiev to his fiefdom, O'Brien. Based on the experience of the online novels he read on Earth, Euphene decided not to go directly to his lord's mansion in O'Brienport, but to wander around his own territory, to understand the situation and even collect some inside information. O'Brien, no, before the new lord named Earl O'Brien officially took office, the name of this territory was still the original Grief. In a small town, called Surfu in the south of Grief, an eye-catching carriage slowly drove in. As for the reason for the eye-catching, it was because this carriage was not a carriage, but should be called a wolf carriage. Pedestrians on the streets of the town all looked at the wolf carriage with a little fear and curiosity, and whispered about it. This wolf carriage is naturally the vehicle of Euphena's elven king clone. Oh, this is in the human world, let's call him O'Brien. Although the sacred giant wolf is not uncomfortable to ride, our Earl O'Brien is a hedonist in his daily life, so he naturally wants to be more comfortable. Besides, he is now an imperial earl, and it is a bit unworthy to always ride a wolf around the world. Therefore, a few days ago, O'Brien bought a carriage in a city and put it on the sacred giant wolf. He and Maiev were doing some unknown things in the wolf carriage. Just kidding. Euphena's consciousness has been mainly focused on the main body these days. O'Brien's body is in a state of lying corpse, and of course he will not do anything good for everyone. But I don't know whether Maiev has done anything to this body. Let's get back to the point. The wolf carriage passed through the main road of Severtown and slowly stopped in front of the only hotel in Severtown. As soon as the doorman of the hotel came up, he was startled by the giant wolf grinning in front of the carriage. Just when he was at a loss, he heard a pleasant voice from the carriage. Just take him to the stable. Remember to find a compartment, otherwise the other horses will be very frightened. After a pause, the voice in the carriage became a little sharper. Xiaojin, don't deliberately make trouble in the stable, do you hear me? The doorman was surprised to find that the giant wolf pulling the carriage seemed to understand the words of the carriage owner. The originally grinning face suddenly drooped down, and a whining sound came out of its mouth. And then, the reins on the giant wolf magically fell off automatically. The giant wolf, whose restraints were untied, moved dejectedly behind the doorman, and made a fierce expression to the doorman, who had been staring at him. The doorman was startled, shuddered, and then reacted. After shouting to the door of the hotel to call another waiter, he hurriedly took the sacred giant wolf to the stable of the hotel. At this time, O'Brien lifted the curtain of the carriage and slowly got off the carriage. After registering at the front desk of the hotel, he moved into the hotel as a wandering wizard. As for Maiev, she was invisible, so of course no one wanted to register with her. Sitting on the bed in the bedroom of the rented superior suite, O'Brien stroked his chin with a thoughtful expression on his face. It seems that there are some unknown inside stories in his territory. In other countries in S-Laser, there may be identity registration requirements in hotels, because of reasons such as guarding against spies from hostile countries. But the Holy Lion Empire, as one of the strongest forces on the continent, has enough confidence to face spies sent by other forces on the continent. In addition, if you really want to enter a country and become a spy, it is very easy to forge an identity. So generally speaking, hotels and other places in the Holy Lion Empire do not require registration. From this point of view, it is really suspicious that the hotel in the town of Seth requires guests to show their identities for registration. More importantly, when registering just now, O'Brien suddenly discovered that the owner of this inn was actually a warrior with silver level strength. The people around the boss who seemed to be cleaning were actually observing O'Brien's men with the same obscure eyes as the boss, and each of them had the strength of black iron or even bronze level. If the innkeeper was an old mercenary who had been fighting for many years or a veteran who was tired of fighting and retired to the countryside to open an inn, this could be explained. But those young and strong men with good strength could be at ease to be waiters in a small country town in the remote part of the empire, which was incredible. After making some guesses, O'Brien soon felt relieved. No matter what kind of inside story there was in his territory, he had to control it completely. The channels for the Night Elves to obtain a large amount of energy in the human world must not be lost. As for possible obstacles, as I said, violence can eliminate all problems. with absolute strength. All obstacles could not trouble O'Brien. He did not think there would be any powerful masters in this remote area of the Empire. O'Brien stood up and prepared to step out of the door. But after standing there and thinking for a while, he sat back down. He was originally going to buy information from the Thieves Guild in the town of Sever, but after thinking about it, he gave up the idea. The Thieves Guild in cities is quite powerful and generally maintains a cooperative relationship with local forces. The members of the Thieves Guild in a small town are probably not as strong as those in this hotel and should have been controlled or directly recruited by local forces. It is obviously more reliable to understand the inside story of this territory as a wandering wizard than to inquire at the controlled Thieves Guild. Although Sever is just a small town, as the gateway to the Grieve territory, it must be strictly controlled by local forces. So it is better to enter the hinterland of Grieve territory and then slowly figure it out. However, O'Brien's long ears moved under his hood. It seemed that the innkeeper and the guys were discussing something. If he was an orthodox mage, he would have the magic to eavesdrop on other people's conversations after reaching the cloud level, but O'Brien was obviously not an orthodox mage, so naturally he couldn't use magic to eavesdrop on the innkeeper's conversation. But without relying on magic, O'Brien had other ways, or other people had other ways. At O'Brien's signal, Mayev Shadowsong, who had been in stealth mode, flashed into the innkeeper's room. Chapter 245 O'Brien Port. Mayev flashed to the room where the innkeeper was. Because of the difference in strength and the effect of Mayev's permanent invisibility, the people in the room did not notice that there was an elf in the room. When Mayev entered the room, the innkeeper with silver level strength was speaking, and O'Brien heard the words of the innkeeper through Mayev. You must always pay attention to the behavior of that wandering wizard. This person is definitely not an ordinary wizard. I feel that I can't see through his giant wolf that he uses to pull the cart. The guys gathered around the innkeeper whispered to each other. When they quieted down, the innkeeper continued, Grieve County can only bring us the best benefits if it is completely in our hands. We must pay attention to any uncertain factors. Do you understand? Several guys looked stern and answered in unison, understood. Then, these guys scattered back to their respective positions, and the innkeeper habitually put on a smile and walked back to the front desk of the inn. It seems that his territory is really controlled by an unofficial organization, and the control is very strict. Any wandering wizard who enters the territory will be closely monitored. O'Brien's idea is a bit wrong. What does any wandering wizard mean? If O'Brien's performance is not as ordinary as that of an ordinary wizard, the innkeeper under the mysterious organization would not have called the guys to hold a special meeting to remind them. In the next 2 days, O'Brien did not rush to leave the town of Seth, but lived in this hotel. Of course, he was not as peaceful as he seemed. Secretly, through Mayev's permanent invisibility and flickering ability, O'Brien kept obtaining information about his territory from the inn staff and the townspeople. And the information he obtained made O'Brien feel more and more interesting. From the townspeople, O'Brien learned that the name of Grieve territory had changed 4 times in just 10 years. This means that within 10 years, this territory has changed 3 lords, which is extremely abnormal. Generally speaking, unless a lord committed treason or all relatives who had the right to inherit the territory died, a territory would not change its owner easily. A prosperous family loyal to the king would often control a territory for hundreds of years. Grieve territory had changed 3 lords in 10 years, and now he came to this territory as the 4th lord. According to the information obtained from the residents of the town, the 4 lords before O'Brien were all small nobles with no background. Even the fief did not include Grieveport, and the title was only Viscount. The rotation of these 3 lords was not because of treason. Even if a lord was confused and committed treason, it was impossible for 4 lords to commit treason in a row, right? These 3 poor lords changed the ownership of the territory because they and their relatives who had the right to inherit the territory all died. From this point of view, the organization that secretly controlled Grieve territory is really powerful. O'Brien could easily guess that the frequent changes of lords were obviously due to the underground organization in Grieve. No, maybe not underground. In Grieve, this organization has dared to appear in the open. In the conversations of the town residents, a term that appeared many times caught O'Brien's attention: Stanley Chamber of Commerce. On the surface, the Stanley Chamber of Commerce controls all internal transactions and foreign trade in Grieve, and the port of Grieve, which has not been controlled by the previous lords, is also under the control of this Chamber of Commerce. That's right, it is this Chamber of Commerce. The previous lords were probably dealt with by the Stanley Chamber of Commerce because they were unwilling to cooperate with the Stanley Chamber of Commerce, or unwilling to give up their rights as a lord. This also reflects that the Stanley Chamber of Commerce probably has some power in the Holy Lion Empire. Although it is only a viscount, it is not a trivial matter to die without reason. At least, it cannot be suppressed without the background of a powerful marquis. However, these are not what O'Brien needs to consider. In terms of strength, he does not believe that a small Stanley Chamber of Commerce can have a legendary strongman. In terms of background, he got the title of Earl through the St. Childe family. It is impossible that the people of the St. Childe family did not know the situation of Grave territory, but they did not oppose O'Brien's choice of Grave territory. They must think that the problems in this territory are nothing. After roughly understanding the situation, O'Brien did not intend to waste time in the small town of Surfu. After settling the accommodation fee for a few days, the Holy Wolf took on the task of pulling the cart again, pulling O'Brien and Maeve to the north of Grave territory. This time, Ufeni planned to go directly to Graveport to solve all the problems in his territory. The contact or war between the Night Elves and the human world has begun, and the war with the Seven Kingdom will officially start in half a month at most. Ufeni no longer has more time to waste on trivial matters. 2 days later, Graveport. Oh no, the official administrative order of the Empire has been issued. The new Lord, Earl O'Brien, is on his way to take office, and this place will be renamed O'Brien Port. Most of the residents in the port curled their lips and said nothing when they heard the news. This is already the 4th Lord in 10 years. Who knows if this place will change its name again in a few years. However, the people on a wolf car in front of the inner port gate obviously don't think so. Lifting the curtain, O'Brien looked at the port that already belonged to him. Although from here you can only see the appearance of the port facing the inland part, O'Brien has expressed that he is quite satisfied. Judging from the length of the city wall, O'Brien Port is obviously a large port. This means that it is more likely to provide energy for the Night Elves through sea transportation. Lowering the curtain, in the surprised eyes of passers-by, this unique wolf car slowly drove into O'Brien Port. Although the little tails that had been following the car before were quite annoying, after solving these troubles personally, O'Brien's mood was much better. However, along with O'Brien's good mood, some people in O'Brien Port were not in a good mood. Or rather, these people were in a very bad mood at the moment. And this bad mood was brought about by our Lord Earl O'Brien. Chapter 246, Facing the Stanley Chamber of Commerce. Entering from the gate of the inner harbor of Aberlin Port, there is an extremely wide road. This road leads directly to the dock of the outer harbor near the sea. Every day, countless carriages pass through this road called Barley Avenue. In the central part of Barley Avenue, there is a mansion with gorgeous decorations. From the eyes of the pedestrians on the avenue, it is easy to see the influence of the people or forces in this mansion in the local area. This mansion is the headquarters of the Stanley Chamber of Commerce. On the surface, this Chamber of Commerce controls the internal and foreign trade of Grieve territory, and secretly, they can be called the Underground Lords of Grieve territory. At this time, the atmosphere in the headquarters of the Stanley Chamber of Commerce did not have the sense of glory given by the gorgeous mansion, but was bleak. In the conference room, an old man who looked quite majestic sitting at the head of the long table had a very ugly face at this time. Some middle-aged and even young people below were constantly communicating, and even shouting at this time. As the noise of the people below became louder and louder, the old man sitting at the head became more and more ugly. Finally, when the noise reached a critical point, the old man exploded. Enough. Shut up. The old man shouted angrily. And obviously, the old man's power was still very effective on the other people sitting around the long table. The people who were still noisy suddenly quieted down. Noisy? No. President, it's not that our army is incompetent, it's just that the communist army is too cunning. No, what did I say just now? President, it's not that we can't think of a way, it's just that the current lord is a bit too powerful. With the ability of our Stanley Chamber of Commerce, I'm afraid we can't fight against the lord assigned by the St. Chilled family. It turned out that the old man was the president of the Stanley Chamber of Commerce, and the more than 10 people present were the management of the Stanley Chamber of Commerce. A few days ago, after the Stanley Chamber of Commerce learned about the background of the upcoming new Lord of Grieve through its own channels, the entire Stanley Chamber of Commerce was in a gloomy mood. The previous lords were only viscounts, and they were all small nobles with no background, and they were unwilling to be puppets of the Stanley Chamber of Commerce. The new lord was not only an earl, but also had the behemoth of the St. Chilled family behind him. Everyone in the Chamber of Commerce must be even more unwilling to be controlled by the Stanley Chamber of Commerce. But because a Lord Earl O'Brien carries the famous name of the St. Chilled family, it is impossible for the Stanley Chamber of Commerce to deal with the new lord. According to the convention, the presidents, vice presidents, and branch presidents who usually call the shots in Grieve are all frowning. After another long silence, President Stanley spoke. The new Earl O'Brien should arrive here soon. We must find a way to protect the interests and status of the Chamber of Commerce as soon as possible. After a pause, President Stanley looked around at the faces of everyone present and said slowly, according to intelligence, Earl O'Brien is a wizard who is said to be very powerful and relatively young. Generally, wizards have a low desire for power. When necessary, we can contribute a large amount of magic materials. When everyone heard this, they understood in their hearts that this was to compromise with the new lord. But this was also a move under no other choice. Facing O'Brien, who had a terrifying background, they had no choice but to cut flesh and bleed. All the vice presidents and branch presidents listened quietly to President Stanley's words. The next step was probably to assign tasks and ask everyone present to bring out some materials. This was a topic that everyone was concerned about. No one wanted to suffer a loss. However, before President Stanley could finish his words, a deafening sound came from outside the conference room, startling everyone. President Stanley, who was sitting in the first seat, was the first to react. He lowered his face and whispered to the guard standing behind him, "Kelly, go out and see what's going on." Guard Kelly whispered that he obeyed, and then walked towards the door of the conference room. But when he just walked to the door and was about to open the door of the conference room, an accident happened. Bang! There was another loud noise, and because the distance was closer, the sound was louder than the previous one. The door of the conference room turned into a piece of debris and flew in with the loud noise, and Guard Kelly, who had just walked behind the door of the conference room, was blown away by the airwave generated by the explosion of the door and hit the long table in the middle of the crowd. The long table was solid. After being hit by the burly Kelly, the legs of the table only trembled a few times before it stabilized again. The table was stable, but the people sitting around the table could not calm down. Everyone, including the president, stood up suddenly. No one cared about the door debris that splashed on them. They all stared at the main wall of the conference room, which had become a big hole. The dust gradually settled, and a voice that could not be distinguished between men and women came from the hole. "There is no need to contribute any magic materials to this Earl. The Stanley Chamber of Commerce can just change its name to O'Brien." Hearing these words, everyone in the conference room felt a shudder in their hearts, and the pupils of President Stanley, who was at the top, suddenly shrank. When the dust settled, a figure covered in a black robe appeared in front of the management staff of the Stanley Chamber of Commerce. This person took out his black robe, holding a dark green staff in his white jade-like hand, and a giant wolf with golden fur lying beside him. Judging from the debris in front of the giant wolf's claws, the explosion of the conference room door was obviously caused by the giant wolf. Looking at the guard lying on the ground outside the conference room, his life or death unknown, and Kelly lying on the long table and groaning, President Stanley couldn't help but feel angry. But he was old and wise, and he didn't show this anger at all. Instead, he put on a smile, walked out from behind the table, and greeted the black-robed figure standing outside the conference room. "This must be Lord O'Brien, right? Oh, sorry, it should be called Lord. I wonder why Lord came to the headquarters of our Stanley Chamber of Commerce instead of settling in the Lord's mansion." After arriving at O'Brien Port, Chapter 247 Absolute strength brings absolute submission. At this time, O'Brien couldn't help but look at the old president of the Stanley Chamber of Commerce differently. He had already come to the headquarters of the Stanley Chamber of Commerce and broke into the meeting room both outside and inside, but the president was still able to greet him with a smile. He was really a man of deep scheming, but it was good that way. As the old man became more shrewd, he would naturally know more about current affairs, and his next plan would be easier to implement. It didn't take long for these thoughts to go through O'Brien's mind, and he quickly responded to President Stanley. This is President Stanley, who controls the above ground and underground forces of the Cell's territory, right? It seems that everyone here is not very welcome to the Cell's arrival. Looking at the expressions of others except President Stanley, O'Brien said leisurely. Those vice presidents, branch presidents, and others who were obviously not as cunning as President Stanley also reacted to this, and one by one they put on a stiff smile and looked at O'Brien, who slowly entered the meeting room. But from their reluctant expressions, it was clear that they were cursing O'Brien in their hearts. As the ruling class that controlled such a large territory of grief, this was the first time they were treated like this. The previous lords had been manipulated by them, but they didn't expect that Earl O'Brien would go directly to the headquarters to show them his power as soon as he arrived. Okay, there's no need to put on that smile that's uglier than crying. This Earl is not the kind of person who likes to do superficial work. As he spoke, O'Brien had already walked into the conference room, pulled out the chair at the bottom of the conference table, and sat on it. O'Brien's words were a bit of a slap in the face. Even President Stanley restrained his hypocritical smile after hearing O'Brien's words, and his tone became cold. Humph. Lord Earl, even if you are a local lord, you have to have an explanation for trespassing into the mansion of the lord, right? Obviously, although President Stanley was ready to compromise with O'Brien, the face of the Stanley Chamber of Commerce still had to be maintained. With O'Brien's physical move of breaking into the door, perhaps he could gain a little advantage in the negotiation and reduce some losses. President Stanley had such thoughts in his mind. However, O'Brien had no intention of negotiating. Explanation? Haha, this is my explanation. O'Brien stood up suddenly. His figure was not tall and majestic, but everyone present suddenly felt a sense of oppression, and as time went by, this sense of oppression became more and more obvious and more substantial. Bang. Finally, a young man who looked weak could not bear the already obvious sense of oppression, and collapsed to the ground. Then, like a chain reaction, everyone present collapsed to the ground one by one according to their strength. Soon, except for O'Brien, only President Stanley could still stand firmly on the ground. However, a blazing flame of fighting spirit had already ignited on his body, and it was obvious that he was in a state of full strength. Haha, I didn't expect that. President Stanley is still strong and healthy. He is actually a cloud level warrior. However, in front of the Lord, disobedient subjects still have to crawl down. With O'Brien's cold words, the sense of oppression in the air suddenly increased by several levels, and President Stanley finally couldn't bear this oppression that was far beyond his strength, and suddenly collapsed to the ground. Looking at the people who all fell to the ground in front of him, O'Brien sneered, retracted his outward mental power, and sat back in the chair. Although O'Brien retracted his mental power, the people who collapsed to the ground could not recover immediately. After O'Brien calmly did it for a few minutes, President Stanley, who was the strongest, slowly stood up with the help of the table. When President Stanley stood up, he looked at O'Brien with undisguised fear and awe in his eyes. After a long time, when everyone who had fallen to the ground recovered one by one, President Stanley's voice mixed with a hint of bitterness sounded, "Respected Master Mage, the Stanley Chamber of Commerce is willing to obey all your orders." In Grief territory, President Stanley, who can be called the uncrowned king, and ruled most of the underground forces in Grief territory, bowed his head, which he had not bowed to for more than 20 years. And his address to O'Brien also changed from the previous Earl to Respected Master Mage. Obviously in his mind, the identity of the Earl was not as prominent as O'Brien's identity as he guessed. Expressing his submission, President Stanley, who was waiting for O'Brien's reply, was not as calm as he seemed. Being able to suppress this determined young CLO level warrior with only his outward momentum or mental power, the strength of this O'Brien may have reached the height of the legendary level. You know, even the Marquis in the Imperial capital who has a cooperative relationship with the Stanley Chamber of Commerce does not have a legendary strongman under his command. Although in war, legendary and higher level warriors do not seem to be as powerful as their names suggest, who would not be afraid of a man who can take his life under the protection of thousands of troops. From the moment he was pressed to the ground by O'Brien's mental power, President Stanley understood that he could only save himself and the entire Chamber of Commerce by completely submitting to the new lord. Moreover, President Stanley also gave up the idea of playing small tricks. With legendary strength and a huge St. Child family behind him, can a small Stanley Chamber of Commerce contend with this? Moreover, the background of this lord is probably not that simple. Recalling the content of the intelligence, President Stanley had the same idea as Duke Child. The other senior executives of the Stanley Chamber of Commerce who stood up also expressed their submission in all like President Stanley. This is necessary, because although President Stanley is nominally the president of the Stanley Chamber of Commerce and the leader of the underground forces in Grief territory, these vice presidents and branch presidents also control underground forces of varying sizes. Amidst the lowered heads, O'Brien stood up, let out a low laugh, and walked out. The further he walked, the louder his laughter became, and in the end, it turned into an unbridled laughter. The people behind him raised their heads and looked at O'Brien, who walked out with his back to them, with complicated eyes. Against the backdrop of the setting sun, O'Brien, dressed in a black robe, looked like a god in the eyes of the crowd, and his wild laughter made him look like a demon. Chapter 248 Establishing Status. Just one day later, the Lord's mansion in the center of O'Brien Port, which had not been used for a long time, was cleaned up in one day, and all the furniture was replaced with new ones. Even the building, which looked shabby from the outside, became brand new, after being repaired by some low-level magicians and craftsmen controlled by the Stanley Chamber of Commerce. In the administrative hall of the City Lord's mansion, a group of people were standing there in a circle whispering. In the center was President Stanley, but no one dared to talk to the man who had always been the supreme ruler of this territory. After receiving the message from the Stanley Chamber of Commerce, the leading figures and underground leaders of O'Brien territory quickly gathered here. However, they had no idea what was going on, and could only ask the vice presidents and branch presidents who were evasive. Soon, they learned that the new lord had arrived. But what puzzled them was why the attitude shown by the Stanley Chamber of Commerce this time was completely different from before. It seems that the answer can only be revealed after the new lord appears. Everyone didn't have to wait too long. A few minutes later, a black figure suddenly appeared on the lord's throne at the top of the hall. Some people rubbed their eyes in disbelief. They didn't notice how this figure appeared there. Okay, everyone, I'm your new lord. You can call me Lord Earl O'Brien or Lord. I have always been casual in addressing people. O'Brien didn't plan to waste too much time on these prominent figures, who only had a certain amount of wealth or were respected, but had no actual power. Gentlemen, I called you here this time just to announce something. O'Brien's body, which was originally sitting upright on the throne, suddenly collapsed backwards, and his tone became soft. From now on, the entire O'Brien territory can only have my voice, do you understand? Except for the members of the Stanley Chamber of Commerce, everyone else looked at President Stanley at the same time. This is a blatant provocation. Don't you know how many lords our President Stanley has killed? However, the people who were expecting President Stanley to be furious were stunned. President Stanley walked to the throne of O'Brien with an expressionless face, knelt on one knee, and lowered his head. I will obey the order of the Lord. Oh my god. What happened to this world? The people who were summoned all exclaimed, and they couldn't react to the situation at all. However, the actions of other people in the Stanley Chamber of Commerce awakened them. After President Stanley set an example, those vice presidents and branch presidents who were usually very arrogant quickly followed, and one by one they made the same gesture behind President Stanley. I will obey the order of the Lord. No one present was a fool. Although they didn't know what happened, since the long-time rulers of O'Brien had surrendered to the new lord, why should they hesitate? For a while, the whole hall was filled with the voice of I will obey the order of the Lord. O'Brien had no excitement or reaction to the statements of the people below. After everyone knelt for several minutes, a lazy voice finally came from above. Okay, everyone, get up. Except for the people from the Stanley Chamber of Commerce. Everyone else should do what you should do. The people who were already sweating stood up. Then, except for the people from the Stanley Chamber of Commerce, everyone else left the Lord's mansion. It can be imagined that when they go home, what happened in the Lord's mansion will soon spread throughout the O'Brien territory. And as the people, except the management members of the Stanley Chamber of Commerce took their positions one by one, and as the door of the administrative hall closed after the last person left, the hearts of the people who remained in the hall gradually became nervous. For a long time, the heavy atmosphere made everyone, including President Stanley, feel as if a big stone was pressing down on their hearts. After a long silence, the figure sitting on the throne who made them feel heavy finally spoke again. Perhaps you have already guessed it. Yes, I'm a legendary mage, and my background is not just as simple as the St. Chilled family. President Stanley had already shared his guess with the people below, and no one was surprised. But you may not know what kind of legendary mage I am. O'Brien on the throne laughed strangely, and at the same time silently said in his heart, I'm not the elegant Night Elf King, I'm an evil and terrifying great mage. To hypnotize himself. Everyone in the Stanley Chamber of Commerce couldn't help but look up. It is absolutely impossible to say that they are not curious about O'Brien. As O'Brien will ride on their heads for a long time in the future, they also want to know more about him. Now I will tell you, I, Earl O'Brien, am a legendary mage of the spiritual system. O'Brien's voice became lower and lower, and the people below couldn't help but listen more attentively. When they heard the word spiritual system, everyone was shocked, but then they fell into a daze. Dividing line. Hey, Chels, have you heard? The new lord has arrived, and Grief Territory has officially changed its name to O'Brien Territory. In a tavern in O'Brien Harbor, a man wearing a low-brimmed hat whispered to his friend. Chels was a burly and rough man. He picked up a glass of beer, raised his head, and drank it all in one gulp, then put down the glass with a dunk, and replied to his friend indifferently, what's the matter? Haven't we changed the name enough in recent years? Just wait and see. It won't be long before the new lord will disappear. Before Chels finished speaking, the man in the low-brimmed hat suddenly covered Chels' mouth, and looked around quickly. Are you going to die? Can you listen to me? I heard that this new lord is different from the previous ones. When the Lord first came, the people of the Stanley Chamber of Commerce summoned the port's leading figures to meet him, and their attitude was very respectful. Do you know what this means? Chels first pried open his hand that was covering his mouth, but he was also surprised after hearing the words of the man in the low-brimmed hat. What? Is there such a thing? Is the new lord very important? The man in the low-brimmed hat shook his head. No, according to speculation, it is very likely that the new lord was sent by the Stanley Chamber of Commerce. Chels frowned and rubbed the wine glass in his hand. Really? I don't know if it is a good thing or a bad thing for a lord who can take power to come. Our development in this territory is too difficult. The man in the low-brimmed hat also handed over a glass of beer, and then sighed and responded, who said it wasn't? O'Brien had only arrived in the territory for 2 days, and people on the streets were already talking about him, the lord who seemed to bring some changes to the O'Brien territory. Chapter 249, Sending Maeve Back. Recently, old Tony, who was guarding a warehouse for the Stanley Chamber of Commerce in a Berlin port, felt something was wrong. The day before yesterday, everything in the warehouse was moved out, leaving only some magic crystals and magic cores. But yesterday and today, a lot of goods were quickly transported into the warehouse, occupying nearly half of the huge warehouse. Strangely, old Tony secretly took a look at the goods that were transported in, and they were all magic crystals and low-level magic cores. Moreover, after these goods, which should have been relatively liquid, were put into the warehouse, no one came to pick them up. They kept piling magic crystals and magic cores into the warehouse, only in and out. Could it be that the Chamber of Commerce wanted to hoard magic crystals and magic cores for Avril? However, the prices of these things are generally relatively constant, and the origins are not fixed, so it is difficult to manipulate the prices to gain profits. Old Tony was very puzzled. And today, something happened that made old Tony feel even more strange. President Stanley actually came to this warehouse. What an honor. For the people of Berlin, President Stanley was equivalent to their lord before, so they naturally felt very awed by him. At the same time as the president, a mysterious person in a black robe came to the warehouse. Moreover, the president seemed to respect this mysterious person. Old Tony rubbed his eyes, then lowered his head, and pretended that he saw nothing. Then, the president told old Tony to guard outside, and entered the warehouse with the mysterious person. After the president and the mysterious person left the warehouse, old Tony curiously entered the warehouse, but he couldn't believe what he saw. The magic crystal ore and magic core that filled half of the warehouse disappeared. This. The smart old Tony reacted after being shocked, and became silent for a while. The warehouse he was guarding was still constantly transporting magic crystal ore and magic cores. Many adventurers in the entire O'Brien territory also felt strange. Recently, all the stores opened by the Stanley Chamber of Commerce no longer sell magic crystals and magic cores, but instead began to purchase these two items at a premium of 10%. Although it felt strange, who wouldn't want to make money? Adventurers went into the mountains and forests to hunt monsters, and then sold them to the Stanley Chamber of Commerce. Back in the bedroom of the Lord's mansion, O'Brien touched the 4 rings on his hand, and took off 3 of them. Previously, relying on some techniques of using mental power that he had studied during this period, O'Brien had shallowly influenced the thinking of all the management of the Stanley Chamber of Commerce, that is, hypnosis. In the subconscious, the management of the Stanley Chamber of Commerce had already surrendered to O'Brien wholeheartedly and resolutely obeyed all of O'Brien's orders. The first order O'Brien issued was to collect magic crystals and magic cores. The power of the Stanley Chamber of Commerce was indeed huge. In just 3 days, it collected magic crystals and magic cores that could be converted into millions of energies by the main body. Moreover, with continuous acquisitions and transportation, this number is still increasing. This made O'Brien very satisfied, and even satisfied that he decided not to drain the Stanley Chamber of Commerce dry, and left all the gold coins that could also be converted into energy for them to operate. Originally, O'Brien was going to convert the entire property of the Stanley Chamber of Commerce into the combat power of the Night Elves, but he found that controlling a Chamber of Commerce that belonged entirely to him might be more conducive to the development of the Night Elves. The 3 rings that O'Brien took off were all space rings contributed by the Stanley Chamber of Commerce. Although the capacity of each ring was not as large as the space ring that O'Brien got when he killed the dead wizard before, it was much larger when added together. Now, these 3 space rings are filled with magic crystals and low-level magic cores. The energy that can be provided after the high-level magic cores are exchanged for low-level magic cores is even greater. So O'Brien did not ask the Stanley Chamber of Commerce to collect high-level magic cores, but instead exchanged some of the high-level magic cores he brought out for low-level ones. Maeve. O'Brien called out lightly. A graceful figure that ordinary people could not see knelt on one knee and appeared in front of O'Brien. Here. What do you want, my king? O'Brien threw the 3 space rings he took off to Maeve. Maeve threw her cloak and put away the 3 space rings. Take these magic crystals and magic cores back to the father, and then the father will tell you what to do next. Yes, my king. A faint light flashed at the place where Maeve was, and then disappeared. Now that the human world has stabilized, there is no need for Maeve to stay by the side of the Elf King's clone. It just so happens that so much energy has been collected, and it is just right for Maeve to take it back. With Maeve's infinite flashing speed, it should be possible to return to the Wind Whispering Forest in a few days. As for the next magic crystals and magic cores, several special ships of the Stanley Chamber of Commerce are already under construction. O'Brien looked to the west with deep eyes. When the energy brought back by Maeve is converted into combat power, it is time to truly show the sharp fangs of the Night Elves to the human world. And the day after Maeve left, O'Brien also left his territory in a Loki carriage, and the sacred giant wolf also shrank and hid in the carriage. It will take at least 2 months to build a ship. Anyway, the territory is run by the people of the Stanley Chamber of Commerce. Euphony doesn't want to spend a lot of time and energy to build a territory. 1 night elf is enough for him. I guess in the novels I read before, the protagonist worked hard to build the territory. It took more than 10 chapters, to build a water wheel, and it also had long-term effects. Is it to make up the word count? Besides, the production level and construction level of SLAs can be said to be nothing to be improved with Yufei's ability. Yufei has seen a lot of magic water wheels and magic mills. He doesn't think that he can improve these things, even though he hasn't even been to college. Now, the identity of Earl O'Brien will disappear for a while. Of course, he has been staying in his own territory and living a peaceful life. Yufei will return to O'Brien territory only after the ship built by the Stanley Chamber of Commerce that can sail in the far North Sea is completed. As for these 2 months, Yufei, sitting in the carriage, touched his chin. In a month, he would command the Night Elves to attack the Kingdom of Severn. In the month before that, he would go to the Elf King's court. After all, he was the Elf King, although he was the Night Elves King. Perhaps he could gain something from the local elves. Yufei, oh no, now he was the Elf King Alan Abner. In this way, Alan Abner sat in a carriage and began to trek towards the elves' territory. Chapter 250 Mysterious Sea Tribe. While our protagonist, well, the protagonist's clone is heading towards the elves' territory, let's turn our attention to the Wind Whispering Forest. Well, there doesn't seem to be anything interesting in the Wind Whispering Forest, just the increasing number of trained night elves. Well, let's turn our attention to a place that has never been touched. This is a place that few people on the SLA's continent have noticed, and even Yufei, a traverser, has not noticed for the time being, the sea. For a long time, the legend of the sea people has been circulating in the SLA's continent, and some high-level people are also sure that there are indeed intelligent creatures in the vast ocean. However, because marine creatures cannot adapt to the environment on land, the sea people have never shown their faces in front of the various races on the continent. And now, what we are going to see is what happened in this mysterious sea. On the edge of the Hormuz Basin, there is a tribe of Hormuz Bay people. As a bay people with strong defense and no need for hunting, this small tribe has always lived a very peaceful life. But today, the days of peace for a long time were broken. Outside a small trench, there stood dense figures. This small trench is where the Hormuz tribe is located. The Hormuz people who don't like to move usually never leave this small trench. They live on the edible water plants cultivated by the bees at the bottom of the trench and some seabed worms washed by the undercurrent. Harps is the patriarch of the Hormuz tribe. With a far more acute perception than other bees, he smelled the breath of danger early. Under Harps's reminder and command, all the bees closed the 2 hard shells behind them, protected their white and tender bodies like humans, and drilled into the mud and sand at the bottom of the trench, or hid in the water plants. All along, the Hormuz people have relied on this trick to resist countless enemies. Whether it is the ferocious carnivorous fish or other invading sea tribes, or even the sharks who dominate the central part of the Hormuz Basin, they all return home and defeat under the hard shells. This time, it stands to reason that with the shells that have withstood countless dangers, the Hormuz Bay people should be able to easily survive the crisis. But the chief of the Bay people, Harps, suddenly had an ominous premonition. Could it be that the sharks are coveting our pearls again? No, since the sharks couldn't do anything with the shells of the Bay people last time, the sea people in the Strait of Hormuz have been trading fairly with the Bay people, and the sharks will not take the initiative to break the rules. But it's strange to say, it seems that it has been a long time since the sea people came to the tribe to trade. No. Harps suddenly understood where his ominous premonition came from. Not only has it been a long time since the sea people have traded with the Bay people, but the Bay people have not seen the sea people appear for a long time. For at least a month, the Hormuz Bay people have not seen the swimming sea people that used to appear around them. Harps suddenly thought of what the shrimp man who came to the tribe 2 months ago to exchange pearls for seabed worms mentioned. It is said that some sea creatures that no one has seen before appeared further east of the Hormuz Basin. These sea creatures are very warlike and have strong fighting power and even dare to challenge the status of shark people. Could it be that the huge shell of Harps trembled? I hope it is not what I imagined. Outside the trench, with a sharp hiss, densely packed figures began to pour into the trench where the Hormuz people lived. Looking closely, walking, up, crawling in the front position are some fish monsters with sturdy bodies, crawling on all fours, but vaguely resembling fish. These crawling forms hold a bone knife. It can be seen that, although they crawl on all fours during the action, I'm afraid that these fish monsters will become upright creatures when fighting. Among these green fish monsters, there are also some blood red fish monsters. These fish monsters are no different in appearance from the fish monsters holding bone knives, but except for the different colors, these blood red fish monsters hold bone staffs instead of bone knives in their forelimbs. After this wave of fish monsters, there were some fish monsters that were dark purple and much larger in size. Their appearance was no different from the fish monsters in the vanguard, but there were fewer of them. But from the size and aura of these dark purple fish monsters, it can be seen that compared with them, the fish monsters in the vanguard can only be regarded as a ragtag army. However, these strong fish monsters are not the end of the team. This small trench, where the Hormuz people live, is destined to welcome many bad guests today. Behind hundreds and thousands of fish monsters, some sea creatures appeared whose lower bodies looked a bit like fish and a bit like sea snakes, and whose upper bodies were humanoid. These sea creatures looked a bit like the legendary mermaids, but they were much more ferocious than mermaids. They all held a weapon between a spear and a staff in their hands. Further back, there were several sea creatures that were similar to the mermaids, but were much stronger and more violent. The weapons of these sea creatures were some giant swords that could not be seen, whether they were made of metal or stone. In the ocean above these armies, there are some slender creatures with limbs and heads that look a bit like lizards. These creatures seem harmless, but when you see one of them spit out a dark green energy wave visible to the naked eye and penetrate the body of a passing flathead shark, you will understand that these creatures are also an extremely powerful sea tribe. Soon, the mysterious sea tribe's troops occupied the trench of the Hormuz people. In the panic of the bees, they were turned out of the mud or water plants by a large number of fish monsters, and were carried by the strong dark purple fish monsters, and placed on an open space. As the largest bee, Harps was naturally carried to the front by the fish monsters. Harps was motionless at this time, tightly closing his shell, and he didn't even dare to open a small gap to observe the situation outside. However, as the patriarch of the Hormuz people, Harps still has a certain strength. With the shallow mental induction, he roughly understood the current situation, and then his heart was chilled. Sure enough, has my guess really become a reality? Sensing those sea creatures that I have never seen before, Harps thought to himself. Just when Harps was worried about the fate of himself and his people, a pleasant voice came from outside the shell. End of this chapter. Thank you very much for reaching the end. Don't forget to like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription, or donation encourages us to continue. Thanks to everyone. See you in the next video.